Welcome to Speaker Fever. Secrets to an amazing CLE presentation. My name is Bill Gallione. I'm part of the Florida Bar CLE committee. And we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to be very brief up here. I'm just going to be here a couple minutes, and I'm going to turn it right over to our panel. We have 3 housekeeping items, and then we can get moving. First one is credits. This has been approved for 3 general credits. You have to check in the back also if you're here live wanting to have credit for today's presentation. Second is noise. We are recording today so that other folks can benefit from today's material, so it's important to come and leave quietly. And in addition, while you might love your ringtone, we would rather not include it in today's presentation. So please adjust your electronic devices. Last is course materials. If you're looking for the packets, course materials are distributed electronically. It should have been through an email and a link that you received. What I'd like to do now is just talk to you about the course. So let's talk about Speaker Fever. I'm going to give you a brief outline, and then I'm going to introduce our first moderator for our first panel. So the past year, the Florida Bar CLE Committee has been looking at how we can improve the quality of the ongoing education classes, the CLE courses, as well as maybe help some other folks enter into presenting. And what we've come up with is we put together a course that's designed to train speakers with the idea it's going to improve the quality of the presentations. We recruited 14 different speakers for you today, divided into 3 topics. And we're going to have 3 different panels discussing each of the topics. And we're just about to get to the first one. The way we broke it down was the first category we're calling nuts and bolts, which is these folks up here. It's some of the basics about how to put together a CLE presentation. The second is written preparation. We're going to talk to you about how to choose, gather, and put together quality materials for the presentations that you're going to be giving. And then the third is what makes a great presentation. And we'll be talking to you about some tips on how to communicate effectively, how to speak to your audience. First up, like I said, is nuts and bolts. So I'm just going to introduce the moderator, and then I'll allow each moderator to introduce the participants for their panel. Today's moderator for Nuts and Bolts is Professor Fingerhut from FIU. He's on the faculty. He's also the assistant director of their trial advocacy program. He has served as the chair for the Florida Bar Criminal Law section, as well as the Florida Bar Criminal Law Rules Procedure Committee. And now we give you nuts and bolts.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll tell you though, as much as I love my FIU, the heart of my law school is sitting right there. If you haven't met Dean Anthony Page, no H in Anthony, nicest guy in the world. He's from Canada. There's nothing not to like about him. And he's doing amazing things for our law school. And so if you have a chance to meet him on the break, I encourage you to do so. Welcome, welcome. Just look around this room at the number of people in this room, right? If you are in this room, you are someone special, all right? You appreciate the importance of CLE programming, you care about the quality of CLE programming, and you do not take CLE programming for granted. We all know, because we are bombarded by private CLE providers, good and bad. This is CLE by us, for us, and so it's an amazingly full room, right? As those of us who do CLE all year long recognize and appreciate. The buy-in for our students at FIU at the College of Law, when new things come up, it's not that you don't know them, it's just that you haven't learned them yet. And that's the spirit that all of us are here today in. So to start things off, nuts and bolts, we're going to talk about the mechanics of creating and planning and presenting great CLE. So to that end, I want to briefly introduce for you 3 significant panelists who are with us, each of whom is going to speak on their own topic. They're going to go for 10, 11, 12 minutes-ish. Then when they're done, we'll entertain any questions that you may have for any of them. So please allow me to introduce them for you. And of course, their full bios are already in the materials. So I'm just going to do the highlights for you. All right, immediately to my right, all right, going to speak about the responsibilities of the program chair is Judge Angie Zayas. She sits in the circuit court in Miami-Dade, just left the family division a week ago?
A week ago Monday.
A week ago. She is now the Associate Administrative Judge for the Unified Children's Court in Miami. Specifically, she's in charge of the Human Trafficking Division, which you would hope you wouldn't need in a juvenile division, but that is obviously not true, so we're lucky to have her. She was board certified in criminal appeals for 20 years. She was the go-to legal mind at the state attorney's office for 15 years in their legal division. And she previously served on the bar's criminal law certification committee. She currently sits with me on the executive council of the criminal law section and is also on the education committee and is an instructor for the Florida Conference of Circuit Judges. Seated next to Judge Zayas is Kansas Gooden of Boyd and Jenneret in Miami. She's going to speak on the important considerations we have to take into account when creating great CLE programming. She's a shareholder at Boyd and Jenneret, where she serves as the firm's appellate practice group leader. She's board certified as an appellate specialist and currently chairs the Florida Bar Appellate Board Certification Committee, and she's also the CLE chair of the bar's appellate practice section. All right, and last but not least, all right, on what could be a topic for a week we could spend with Miss Bandy, Rebecca Bandy. She's the director of our magnificent Henry Latimer Center for Professionalism. She also serves on the ABA Standing Committee on Professionalism. And so you can read in her bio, she's been a litigator, she's been a teacher, but through her course of study and practice now, she will speak especially on and does mindfulness-based emotional intelligence. I just read that Dan Goleman book.
So good.
It's from the 90s, I think. It's about.
But it's been updated, yes.
It's been okay then, but it's about how emotional intelligence can be as if not more important than IQ, right?
Yes.
Great book. Implicit bias, team building, active listening, and gratitude resilience, which as a profession is an awesome thing for us to be mindful of in any day, especially in the present day. So if you would, a round of applause for our panelists, please. And with that, Judge Zayas, you're up.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So we're here today to talk about the nuts and bolts of a good CLE program or CLE programming. And for me, nuts and bolts means the planning, the preparation, and the logistics, what goes into creating a program. Specifically, I'm going to talk to you about the role of a chair of the program. And in simplest terms, the chair is the person who basically puts it all together, coordinates all the moving parts. That doesn't mean that the chair does everything, but the chair oversees and basically coordinates all the moving parts. And as you'll hear later on in the presentation, there are lots of moving parts. It does take effort to put together a successful CLE program, but it is a lot easier than you would think if you plan. Planning is probably the most important and crucial step of any successful CLE program. Am I not on?
Just closer to your mouth, Judge.
Oh, sir. I've never been accused of being quiet. There you go.
It's the first time for everything.
First time for everything. Okay. All right. So putting together a CLE program is a lot easier than you would think. It does take effort, of course, but it is a lot easier than you would think. After all, you've all attended CLE programs. Some good and some not so good. You all know what you like and you all know what you don't like. So the question is, how do you create a successful program? And the secret, of course, is planning. Right? So the first step that I would suggest is take a look at the Florida Bar CLE Committee Member Handbook. And I know that's a mouthful, and it's a pretty intensive book, but it's got ideas in there. It's going to get you started on your way, and so you don't waste time, you don't run around in circles. It'll give you ideas on how to recruit speakers, how to plan your programming, and I won't talk to you about all of the details, but you are going to have to give consideration to the details: full day, half day, food, no food, statewide, local, all of those things. And the CLE handbook is going to give you some insight on how to start your planning process. So that's going to be, I think, your first step. And not only that, it'll help you ensure that your program is approved for credit, because that's really the draw. Why do your attendees, your target audience, attend your program? Because they need CLE credits. So if you follow the Florida Bar's programming, planning, et cetera, you're going to optimize the chances of getting credit approved. And of course, that's what you really want to do. So once you've done that, and it's going to give you the details, things that you might not have thought about, you might not have, there's always something in the background that we kind of sort of take for granted, but if you read the handbook, it's going to give you an insight as to what some of those details are, and it'll put it back on the front burner for you. So I highly recommend that. The next step is development of the program. So there's two really important parts of planning a CLE: your program development, that's the topics, the speakers, the actual program, but there's also the logistics. And we're going to talk about the logistics in a little bit, but clearly they have some interplay. For example, date and venue. Date and venue, when and where, that's going to determine what speakers are available to you, right? So clearly you're working on both of these things at the same time, but today we're going to start with programming. So first thing you need to do is decide your target audience. Who's your target audience? Is this a local bar? Is it a statewide bar? Are you talking to new lawyers? Are you talking to experienced lawyers? Are you talking to certified lawyers? Figure out who your target audience is going to be. That's going to help you determine what kind of program you're going to develop, what kind of speakers you're going to have, who your speakers are going to be. Obviously, then you're going to want to talk about your steering committee. So your steering committee is going to be your planning committee. They're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, right? And you're going to want to make sure that your steering committee is familiar with your target audience. So that's why it's important to focus on your target audience first. Your steering committee will know what your target audience needs to hear, wants to hear, what they've already heard, right? So you're really going to, you can rely on your friends and your colleagues to be part of your steering committee, but you really want to reach broader. So if, for example, if you're going to present a statewide program, as Professor Fingerhut pointed out, I was chair of the criminal law section for a year. I'm actively involved in the executive committee of the criminal law section. We put on CLEs all the time. Those are statewide. We always make sure to bring in people from all parts of the state as our steering committee, so that we can invite persons from all parts of the state to be participants in our program. If everybody from Miami-Dade is planning, guess what? You're only going to get a Miami-Dade audience. You're not going to get the Tallahassee audience. You want to invite the Tallahassee people? Put a Tallahassee person on your steering committee. So think, who's your target audience, and then focus on your steering committee with that in mind. They'll also be able to, a good steering committee will also help you to be able to identify your speakers. What speakers are going to appeal to your target audience? And that's why it's important that your steering committee know your target audience and be familiar and perhaps be part of. When you're planning your steering committee, it's really important to make sure that your steering committee reflects your membership, the membership of your target audience. In geography, diversity, always make sure that you're keeping that in mind. Also, with your steering committee, balance a little bit of experience with some fresher perspectives. And you're going to keep this in mind when you select your speakers as well. All right. Next, you're going to want to talk about your program, your topic, and your program segments, right? So you can have a broad topic, DUI, for example, but then you're going to have to break it down into program segments. This is where your steering committee, you're going to brainstorm, you're going to come up with some ideas. They'll be able to tell you what your target audience has already seen. And I'm going to refer back to the criminal law section a lot, because that's what I've been doing. Most of my CLE presentations have been with that. One of the things that your target audience, you have to keep in mind, emerging law. What's the hot topics in law? Are there recent decisions that have just come out that might be of interest? But also take a look at the master calendar, right? What else, the Florida Bar master calendar, the local bars master calendars. You may have a great idea, right? When Daubert was first coming in, everybody was doing Daubert. right? But everybody was doing Daubert. So what could you do that somebody else wasn't doing? So you have to make sure, if you want a successful program, don't do something that somebody has already done, or don't do something that somebody has recently done. An example for the CLE, for the criminal law section, we have a lot of members that are members of the FACDL, the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. They do a DUI program, so do we. We always have to make sure that our DUI program doesn't back-to-back with their DUI program, make sure that our content isn't exactly like their content, that we're offering something different, that we're not direct competition. So be considerate of all of that. Look at your local bar associations, look at your voluntary bar associations, and figure out all of that when you're focusing on your topic, on your program segments. Be flexible. You might walk into your planning session thinking, this is what my program is going to be, this is what our program is going to be, but when you get feedback from even your speakers, be ready to modify that just a little bit.
So, Judge, just let me
Yeah.
jump in and ask you, all right. So you've picked your faculty, and it's becoming clear to you in the planning that you have a faculty member who is in this more for themselves, to try and generate some business for themselves, instead of being in it for your target audience, and making sure that we can serve our clients and communities better. As program chair, are you stuck with that speaker? Do you get rid of that speaker, or can you counsel them to see the mission of the programming a little differently?
Well, I think it depends on, that's a good question, and we were just about to talk about how you select your speakers, but I think, as to answer your question, it depends on where you are in the process. So if it's in the planning process, you can say, oh, you know, John Smith, he's an expert on this field, but your steering committee should be able to tell you, no, you know, I've heard him speak, and he's really all about him and his business. He's not really about the community. So it depends on.
You know, I've always been curious when we use that term steering committee for CLE. The steering committee is the faculty, and you, the program chair, mostly, no?
Well, I look at it a different way. So we have a planning committee. When I think of planning committee, we have the program chair, and you might be assigned program chair because you're a member of a voluntary bar association or a local bar association, or maybe you're part of a Florida bar section, and you are the CLE chair. So now you say, we need a program, we need a spring program. What are we going to do for our spring program? So I'm going to designate you to be my program chair for the spring program. Then you put together a group of people, your planning committee or your steering committee, to talk about what's out there, what should we present, what do you think our members would be interested in? And then you select your faculty, and your faculty is really your speaker. So I look at it slightly differently.
Okay.
So when I use the word steering committee, I'm thinking your planning committee. You know, who's planning this? And your planning committee will reach out to speakers. And so when you sit down and say, well, we need I'm going to go back to Daubert. You know, Daubert's coming out. We need a program on Daubert. What can we do that hasn't already been done, or has it already been done? Who's a good speaker on that? And
do you have a feeling about assigning co-chairs? Does it matter whether you have faith in your chair if they're new? Or is it sometimes better to have two people running the show? What do you think?
It depends. It depends on how large the program is. Is it a 2-day program? Is it a 1-day program? It depends on whether you're trying to mentor somebody in. Sometimes that's a good way to bring somebody who you think would be a great leader and would be a great program chair, but is a little hesitant. You could say, why don't we chair this together? And that way you're grooming that person to take over the role next year, and that will allow that person to jump in. So I've been co-chairs. I've been a co-chair on CLE programs, and I've done it separately, so it depends. You know it when you see it. So when you select your steering committee or your planning committee, as well as your speakers, I highly recommend that you balance, again, fresh perspective with experience. You want to pick people who are knowledgeable in the area. You want to pick people who are not only knowledgeable in the area, but are also good speakers. Not all good speakers are knowledgeable, and not all knowledgeable people are good speakers. So you have to have that balance, and that's where having a planning committee comes in. That way you've got real insight as to what's going on, because you don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you, right? So that's where your steering committee or planning committee is really important. Again, your speakers should reflect the membership of your target audience. And you want to make sure that your speakers haven't spoken to everybody. Who's going to come see this person speak for the 100th time?
Right now, you've referred to that several times, and I think it's important, target audience.
Your target, yes.
Right. In my experience in 30 years of CLE, my target audience is my paying audience to bring money to the section,
Oh, okay.
especially when, is Chase in the hallway? Yeah, especially when, oh, you're here? All right, earmuffs. Especially when the bar is going to take 147% of the income that we raise.
Okay.
All right,
So,
now, I know you're a little more, you're classier than I am. I'm sure you don't mean that by target audience. But that's what I'm saying. Look at this full room. I refuse to believe that the main reason why you're in this room is because this is a free CLE. Right? Because there's other free stuff you can go and there's free soda out there. You know, you're here because this stuff means something to you. So when you referred to target audience, I assume you meant something.
okay, so when I refer to target audience, clearly you want to fill the room, and clearly you want to meet your budget, and clearly if you're doing a Florida bar CLE program, they get their cut. I mean, read the book, read the manual, they'll tell you, they get their cut. If you're presenting for a local bar association, they're going to want their cut as well. And that's, it's not that it's in for profit, but you don't want to lose money either. They have administrative cost. And I'll jump to that. I was going to talk about that a little later, is that if you're working with the Florida Bar or if you're working with the local bar association, there is a good chance that you'll have a professional staff member that will be assigned to your committee to help you plan what you need to plan. So there's administrative costs that go into your CLE, and so you want to make sure that you have enough people in the room that will meet your costs. So moving over to logistics, pick your logistics. You have a hotel, you have an office building, are you going to provide food or you're not going to provide food? What's your venue going to be? Are your people going to travel? Are they going to be able to park? You have to consider all of those, and I'm not going to get too much into that because I believe Kansas is going to talk about a lot of that stuff. But you do have to keep these things in mind. So going back to Professor Fingerhut's question, what is your target audience? It is the people in the audience who are going to pay to attend, but really, who are you reaching? Are you reaching new lawyers? Are you reaching certified lawyers? Are you presenting the board certification review planning session? What are you doing? And so when I say target audience, that's what I mean. Who are you teaching? Who are you trying to reach? Obviously having people.
And of course, remembering that they're going to sell this for 3 years for the next cycle, so it's not just the audience in the room.
Correct.
That we're preparing for.
So who are you trying to reach? That's your target audience, and what's the best way to reach them? And your planning committee and your speakers are going to be, if you take care of those details, the seats will be filled. And that's how you know that you have a successful program, that you've imparted information that needs to be imparted, and you filled the room, and you've hopefully done more than just barely break even. And that's how you know that you've got a successful program and that people are asking you to do it again next year. That's how you know you've been successful. And I think I might be just out of time.
No.
No, okay. So
minutes.
with logistics, when you're planning your logistics, also keep your target audience in mind. If it's a local bar association or is it a statewide bar association, pick your date, look at your master calendars, look at school calendars. Make sure that you're not conflicting in topic as well as in dates with some other major event that's going on. Be aware, and that's where your steering committee or your planning committee is going to really help you. They're going to know what's going on in their if you're presenting a statewide program, they're going to be able to tell you, wait, the Orange County Bar is doing something on that day, and it's a big deal for them. We can't do something on that day because we'll lose that entire group. So that's why it's important to have diversity in your group and have a breadth of experience in your steering committee, and be aware of everybody's master calendars, what's going on, technology, your venue. Do they have to travel? What city? Venue is not only the hotel, but also what city? I know that when we were doing statewide CLEs, it was a question of, do you want to be in Orlando? Do you want to be in the Tampa airport? The Tampa airport's relatively dreary, but it allows people to fly in. Orlando, or Orange County Bar, gave us a great venue. Their Orange County Bar offices, great venue. Problem is people have to fly in or drive in, and then parking was kind of shaky, and then we had to cater in. So you always have to think of those things when you're picking the city, venue, but also the specific site, the hotel, the office building. Is there parking? Is there food nearby? Are you going to offer food? Can you cater it in? Think of all of those little details when you're selecting your venue, and to optimize participation, because those things matter. And where's Chase in the room? Chase, do we have any chocolate chip cookies today? Yes. Okay, that's a private joke with Chase and I, and we were very good on chocolate chip cookies.
I don't know how private it is. I'm sure that was $850, Chase, for the chocolate chip cookies.
All the details are very, very important when you're putting all the big things together. And the bottom line is, program chair, you're coordinating the moving parts, you're setting deadlines, you're reminding people of deadlines, and you're saying, how can I help you meet that deadline? All right, and that's what a program chair does. It's easier than you think, and I encourage you to try it.
Thank you, Judge. Just so you know, from your CLE committee, this is going to be uploaded for free. You're not going to have to pay for this one in the cycle, right? Okay, you don't get that from the other sections, right, Bill? All right, Kansas. Let's pick up where Judge Zayas left off and help us keep figuring out how to plan great programming.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk to you about those details. So my perspective, I run the CLE program for the appellate section, but I have also organized multi-day and just humongous CLE programs for local and statewide voluntary bar associations. So a lot of my advice to you comes from the School of Hard Knocks. I learned the hard way. I had some miserable fails, and we had some great successes. So hopefully I can share with you some of the stuff that I've learned over the years. And so I'm going to start kind of big, and then you'll see kind of the presentation going small. So I'm going to start with kind of live CLEs, and I'm going to start with multi-day events. And when you have a multi-day event, like over the weekend, I highly recommend do not have people do like 8 hours of CLE over those like 3 or 4 days. Those people will kill you by the end. It will happen, there will be mutiny. So have your CLE in the morning and then have like excursions in the afternoon. Have, opportunities to go deep sea fishing.
What sections do this? You know what this is? This is family, right? Reptile.
Yes.
Trial lawyer section. Steakhouse for lunch.
Not criminal.
Steakhouse for dinner.
Not criminal.
All right, hey, I'm into the excursion. All right, that's a new CLE thing for me.
Yeah. Organize a spa getaway for the ladies. I mean, there's like stuff that you can really do to think about this stuff. So just make sure to have off-site opportunities for everybody. And Judge Zayas was talking about having a steering committee. For these multi-day events, you absolutely have to have a committee. Trying to do one of these yourself, don't do it. I learned the hard way on that one. That's one of those hard knocks. Yeah, I'm about to kill myself the first time I tried to do a multi-day by myself. Having a core group of people to help you find speakers, line up the excursions, having dinner reservations basically for 300 people, it makes your life a whole lot easier when you have a big group helping you make those things happen. So moving on, one-day CLEs, and these are just 8-hour CLEs. So we have tried different things. I'm just going to start. Breakfast. Are you going to offer breakfast? Panera does a great catering. They have great muffins. But if you're bringing in breakfast, one thing that we have found, especially the appellate section, is asking the appellate judges to come have breakfast with us. And having the appellate judges in the room and just a meet and greet, our attendance skyrockets on those events. So it's little stuff like that. If you're the trial lawyer section, having the trial judges. If you're family law section, the family law judges. I mean, just thinking of those moving parts, fantastic. Also, make sure you're doing like 50-minute segments and not huge chunks of CLE. It's always good to have tons of breaks built in. Again, hard knock. Because the more breaks, the more people are going to get up. They'll network with each other. They'll feel better about being there at your CLE. There'll be less interruptions during. So just having multiple breaks built in. This will also help if you have to switch out computers with the PowerPoint. That's something that you don't really think about. But it builds you some time in there to give, yourself a breather, just in case the tech goes a little haywire, because sometimes it does. When you're thinking about those presentations in those 50-minute segments, I found it's really good to have a mix between panels and then individual speakers. If you have all panels over an 8-hour span, it's a little overload. And the same with if you have all individual speakers, it can be overload. Panels tend to be a lot more interactive with each other. Speakers are very substantive, especially, lawyers, we're gonna throw case law at you all day when it's just a substantive topic. And so having a good mix makes it for a very successful CLE. Again, just making sure you include some topics for like newer attorneys. I also have a little note in here, using like the board certified attorneys in your practice area as resources. Not only they help for steering committee, they can help with faculty. They are interacting with other lawyers in the area, and they can say, hey, there is this rising star that I am seeing. We need to pull this person out and let's mentor this person. So just reaching out to those board certified attorneys, and they can really help you help you find speakers, help you find just a little bit of everything.
Kansas, if I can just ask you quickly, when you say include stuff for newer lawyers,
Yes.
do you mean programs designed for newer lawyers, or what if you're doing an intermediate level or an advanced level program?
Well, so when I mean newer level, so the way the bar's set up, the basics are essentially, I think, like 1 to 2 or 3 years. And so it's really after that 3-year, like 3 to 6 year is really the bulk that I'm looking at, where somebody is starting, especially with the appellate practice section, I still want it to be approved for appellate board certification, because that person is probably starting to work towards that goal eventually. And so they might not be as knowledgeable as the 15-year lawyer, but they're wanting to get there. And so something a little not as advanced, but a little more basic. And I don't know if basic's the right word, but just not as advanced. Maybe throwing in a topic like that. I like including a lunchtime panel and not allowing people to leave. Again, hard knock. If you let people leave, they don't come back. We've made that mistake. So, yeah, that was embarrassing. So, we always try to get some type of catering in at food. Here's some other suggestions. Think about the food you're serving. So you're going to have somebody up here talking. A lot of times we try to put ethics or something like that during the lunch hour. It's an easy way to build in the ethic credit. But think about the food you're serving. Make sure it's not too loud. Again, hard knock. Also, make sure you're asking when people sign up about, do they need a vegetarian option? And do they have any food allergies? That is a big deal right now. And I feel like that question gets overlooked a lot. I went to an event and they had, it was like a peanut sauce. And I thought, that is, for a big banquet, to throw peanuts on a banquet table, that is just asking for trouble these days. So just simple questions like that, just in the registration process, will save yourself like a whole lot of heartache and probably somebody's trip to the ER. So the other thing that we have also played with is also a reception after the fact. I would not do breakfast and a reception because that's a little much. I would pick either or. We've had a reception. We did one, a CLE at the second DCA, to where we could just walk Behind it, there's a really cool restaurant called Ulili, I think is how you pronounce it. Kind of walk through the fence. It was a fantastic event because everybody could just walk from the CLE right over. So if you're going to do a reception that's not technically on site, pick something close. Just moving on, half days. I know with the appellate section, we've been starting to really push half days. And we're getting a lot of traction, and we're actually making the most money for our profit-wise on our half-day CLEs. We did a half-day that was all about tech. And we only need 3 hours of tech, but it was like 5 hours of tech, and everybody loved it.
Was that a live or was it webcast?
It was live. We did it at FIU last September, and it was really well attended, and it was very nuts and boltsy. Like, how do you use an iPad at oral argument? And, little things like that. And it was very well attended.
Do you have a feeling on webcasts, the development of sections going to even 1 hour, 2 hour lunchtime webcasts, or do you favor those or not?
Well, with the appellate section, we always have had a monthly CLE, and we did it telephone for years. And so the last 5 years, I think we've done it by webcast. And it has been very successful for us. And so we are also doing these half-day. Also, we do webcast as well. And we do it more like practice focus. And I have 2 minutes, so I'm going to start just shouting some stuff at you. Live streaming. So here's some good stuff. So anytime that we are trying to focus on tech, highly recommend live streaming because you actually look like you are tech savvy. Again, hard knock. So the other kind of flip side of the live streaming, if you're trying to drive up your live attendance for an event, don't offer live streaming. So, because what ends up happening is somebody will watch from their office and not attend. So it's a trade-off. So you just have to play with that as much as possible for events. Let me see. Other considerations, we were already talked about location, dates. Fridays are really good for a lot of lawyers because they can take long weekends. So that is always just a fantastic day to do CLE. Mondays are bad. If you're doing a local event, Wednesdays tends to be good for some reason. And then I also just wanted to touch on aftermarket sales. Aftermarket sales really depends on the type of credit that you are requesting from the bar. Because when somebody searches in InReach, a lot of times they're searching by the type of credit. So if somebody's coming for appellate section credit, some of our courses are cross-marketed for civil trial or family law. And so a family law practitioner will type in family law certification, and then our CLE will get kind of swooped up into that and will get purchased as well. So that's something to always keep in the back of your mind if you're doing something for the Florida Bar specifically, is kind of cross getting certification on various levels. So thank you.
2 quick questions for you, Kansas.
Yes.
One, in your opinion, what is the importance to the program chair of having an indispensable section liaison to lean on to help you get your program done?
Yeah, indispensable, and I will completely give Sherry Wright the biggest shout out on the planet. She's the appellate section liaison, and she's amazing. there's so much these liaisons do behind the scenes to make a CLE function. I mean, she's the one who's getting my catering from Panera and making sure there's enough seats and making sure the sponsors table's correct and making sure, you know, people are in the right place. I mean, they really are the lifeblood of the CLEs.
Should the program chair be prepared to take on a greater role if they don't have that luxury?
Yes. And so for when I do this for the voluntary bars, where I don't have a liaison to help me, and I end up having to do that, and that's where all the hard knocks come from, because I don't have a liaison to help me and like guide me and do a lot of this stuff. And so I'm ended up going to Panera doing this myself. And so if you are in an organization where you have an executive director or liaison, use that person, because they are so knowledgeable and they have done this hundreds of times. They're fantastic.
I mean, for the bar, we've been very lucky. We had Chase, and not everybody has a Chase, and now Chase is in charge of getting everybody else to work with us. So one last question for you before we get to Rebecca. The importance of a program chair who can keep their speakers on time, to get their written materials in on time. Frequently they're going to say, hey, listen, it's voluntary, I'm doing the best I can. The bar is getting tougher on its deadlines to go to print. They don't want us bringing materials on the day of. So we know it's important. What if you're a program chair who doesn't like doing that to people? How problematic is that?
I think it's a huge problem. I mean, I'll be the first to say it, I nag my speakers until they give me the stuff. And I've been known, like, I have to travel a lot for my job anyways. I've been known to show up at their office. Like, hi, is your stuff ready?
Is that one of the excursions to go?
But we're all good friends in the appellate section, so they all just kind of laugh at me.
Right.
But yeah, it's extremely important because the materials don't get bound in time, they don't get to the attendees in time, and it puts everything on hold. It's not a good situation.
Thank you, Kansas. Rebecca.
Yes.
You're not going to talk about food, are you? Because Kansas is driving me insane.
Food.
Okay.
I have a favor to ask you guys. If you could play along with me for a second, could you please clap your hands if you are a section chair? Give me a good clap if you're a section chair. Okay, all right. Could
One
you
very
clap?
shy section.
Clap your hands if you are going to be developing a CLE or a presentation in the near future. Thank you. Clap your hands if you enjoy going through 40 PowerPoint slides in a very short amount of time. I hear laughter. I was expecting silence, and that is a good thing. Now, I'd like you to think for just a second about who you like to listen to, who you like to learn from, what speakers engage you. And if you can, jot down some ideas if you have paper in front of you. I know it's difficult the way we're seated in here. But think about that for just a second. Now, I'm asking that question because I taught before law school and then practiced law, went back into teaching and back into law. And one of the first tasks that I had when I walked into my job at the bar as assistant director of the Latimer Center was, you're going to teach the professionalism diversion course. For those of you that don't know, that's a class for the attorneys who've gotten in trouble and have gotten a pat on the wrist, and they have to pay a good amount of money to come and be a captive audience for me for 4 hours, right? And I was given material, and it literally was 70 PowerPoint slides. And I wanted to pull my hair out. Because here's what I know. Adults learn differently than children, okay? Adults learn differently than adolescents and high schoolers, okay? Yet, here we are in the legal arena doing the same stuff that we torture our kids with. No high schooler wants to sit through a PowerPoint presentation, right? You don't want to sit through a PowerPoint presentation, and yet we don't do anything differently. So I'm here today just to give you some ideas on how you can develop CLEs based on adult education theories and principles in mind. This is an all-day content area, seriously. So it was pretty difficult for me to narrow some of this down, but I think I can give you some quick ideas to kind of help you and to understand, okay, when we're developing these CLEs, whether it be a half day or whether it be a whole day or multiple days, here are some easy things we can tweak in to make this a little bit better and make it work better. Number one is this, right? All of us in this room, even though we're all lawyers, we're brilliant people, some of you are judges, we all know how smart lawyers are, right? Well, guess what? We don't have an attention span more than about 15, 20 minutes. If you Google it, there's research that sort of varies anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes. 20 minutes, you're gone, right? You're zoning out. And there's research that shows that the way that we pay attention obviously is changing with technology. Pretty interesting stuff. Some people worry that we're losing our attention span. I think we're processing things a little bit differently, okay? The other thing I want you to keep in mind is this. You only have about 8 seconds to grab someone's attention. That's it. So if you're doing a presentation or you're developing presentations, you have 8 seconds to grab their attention. If you don't, you've lost them. And you only have about 20 minutes to hold their attention. I don't care if this is a 5-year-old, I don't care if this is a 15-year-old, I don't care if this is a 55-year-old. This is how your brain works, okay? Think about yourself. You're yawning, you're zoning out. I'm thinking of everything I have to do when I leave somewhere if I'm sitting in a presentation, okay? So you have to vary it, and there's some things you can do to make that easy. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is this. We are terrible at multitasking, but we're overconfident about that, okay? We think we're great at it, right? Fantastic. Ask my program coordinator how good I am at multitasking, right? Those of you who were here early saw me walking in late because I was giving out like awards at the judicial luncheon today. I've got a calendar full of stuff. I am at one end of the resort to the other. We all do. That's our life. We're terrible at it, folks. It wears us out. We miss a lot of information. Corporate America loses billions of dollars a year because we're bad at multitasking. So keep those things in mind, okay? Adult learners come to the table with relevant experience, okay? So when I'm doing a presentation or I'm putting together a presentation, I never ever think I'm the smartest person in the room. In fact, I think I'm probably the least smartest person in a room, but what I am gonna be is one of the most prepared people in the room, okay? That's important. What I want to do is make sure that every person in the room is engaged and part of the conversation, which is why I had you do the silly hand clap, right? I wanted to grab your attention. I was modeling, okay? I wanted to grab your attention. I wanted to hold that attention. I wanted to bring you to attention, and I wanted you to be part of the program, okay? That's important. It is important you get to know your audience. For me, I'll stand at the door. I'll introduce myself. I'll chit-chat. I'll have breakfast, I sit at their table. Very rarely will you see me sitting still. And I don't ask my panelists usually to do that because I want to be part of the room, and I also want my observers to be part of the conversation. That is so important. So our brains are made up of billions of neurons, and I won't go too deeply into this because I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do have a basic understanding of it, and again, this could be an day-long program. So we have billions of neurons, and those neurons communicate with one another at synapses and communicate. When we have actual learning occur, okay, our neurons will actually form neural connections, and our brains will actually change. That's amazing. Now, for adults, that change doesn't occur if we're just passively exposed to information. So if we're staring at PowerPoint slides all day long and we're paying attention for only about 10 to 15 minutes and we're zoning out, we may get re-engaged, you're not going to retain it. I may have 70 pages of professionalism slides to show you with substantive material that's really, really important, and it is really important, but if you're not retaining it, what's the point of that? Okay? What's the point? It's lost. So for adult learners, you have to understand it cannot be passive. You have to build connections with what they already bring to the table and what you're trying to bring to the table so that those things connect. And you have to make it relevant. You have to make it personal to them, which requires sometimes reflection, requires discussion, requires feedback, maybe some activities, things that we're a little scared to do, okay? But you have to do it. If not, it's just passive and the brain's not gonna change. But if you can make that connection, that relevance, your brain actually will grow those neural connections, and that's amazing when you think about what you're doing. Okay, so that's super, super important. So just some quick tips here to kind of help you, and I mentioned a few already. You want to grab attention really fast, okay? I always start by asking people to put away their technology. I'll be honest with you, especially when I'm teaching that diversion course or I'm teaching the practicing with professionalism course for new attorneys, they get real mad at Becky, real mad. And I don't care because I taught high school for 10 years, so whatever. Don't care. Throw in the basket. I don't do it disrespectfully. I'm a mom. I'm a single mom of 2 small kids. My phone is always on. It's usually out. I'll be honest with you. But there's a time and a place. So, twofold. I want people to pay attention. I want them to know that what I'm offering them is relevant and important and worthy of their attention. And it also gets their attention, right? Even if it angers or makes them uncomfortable for a little bit. Can I enforce that? No, usually not. I can in the diversion class, but it's just a little trick and you can do it nicely. And a lot of times afterwards, people will say, you know what, it was really nice to have my cell phone off. If I'm teaching mindfulness classes or emotional intelligence classes, I build in the information about our attention spans, and I build in the fact that our devices are anxiety causers, and we talk about the neuroscience of that, and so they understand, okay, that's why she did it, and that was important. Get away from PowerPoint if you can. Use Google Slides, use Sway, do panels. I'm on the ABA Standing Committee for Professionalism, and I can tell you we just had a huge discussion on what is drawing people into CLEs. We like small bits of information. There's a reason for that, even if we don't understand it. In an age of Facebook and Twitter, we want small bites. So change it up, then build in activities that are interactive, okay? Am I at 2 minutes, I think, probably? So you want to do that. The big draw are like TED Talk interviews now. So consider doing that. Panels work, but make them interactive. That's really super important. Make your information appeal to the emotions. Emotions will lead to memory building. If you look at the neuroscience of memory formation, if you think of your strongest memories, most of them are tied to strong emotional experiences. So what you're presenting, try to make sure that it is tied to an emotional, some kind of emotional appeal. You want to maintain high energy throughout the presentation. The presenters, when they're presenting, need to know what they're doing, but they need to also be teachers. That's going to take probably some prepping with them, right? Somebody can be an excellent lawyer, but a terrible public speaker. Nobody wants to sit and listen to a terrible public speaker for 8 hours, okay? So that's where we kind of have to do things a little differently. We also like things like podcasts now. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a podcast addict. Small bits of information, 15, 20 minutes. It all makes sense because it goes with what we're doing. We want to be authentic, okay? Be authentic. I don't know everything about everything. I told you at the get-go, I'm not an expert on neuroscience. I've just taught for a really long time. If I don't know something, I'm going to admit I don't know something. The last thing people want is somebody who's going to be phony or fake or trying to be something they're not. So again, you want to vet your speakers. And if you are the speaker, you really want to just be yourself and be authentic. And then finally, just have fun with it. Big chunks of information, activities, and those activities can include discussion, reflection. When I'm teaching mindfulness or emotional intelligence, we'll do breathing exercises. We'll walk around and do mindful walks. We will meditate. There's a plethora of things you can do. One of my first CLEs that I did when I took over as director, I literally had to fill in at the last minute for the former director, who's a friend of mine, had no idea what I was doing, winged it. I took color crayons and coloring books, and those people, I thought they're gonna fire me. I'm gonna be fired. They loved it. I still get feedback from that presentation because I was talking about the benefits of adult coloring and being in the moment. So it tied together, make everything relevant. Thank you.
We should make all 100,000 plus lawyers spend a day with you. We have a couple minutes for some questions before Bill gets up here and gives us to our first break. So anybody have anything they want to ask of our panelists? Okay, I'm sure that there's a microphone floating around, so here. No, but it's not for you. It's for the people who were going to get this. Thank you, Chase.
Okay, I want to hear more about how Google Slide has a different effect than PowerPoint.
It's just a little bit more modern, and this is something I did last week, honestly, is I did a little informal survey on social media of all of my teacher and administrator friends, and I said, what do you guys do in your classrooms now? Teachers are excellent resources, and they're underappreciated, so if you ask them questions, they will happily pour out all the information in their heads for you. But it's easier to use, actually, than PowerPoint, and it's just a little fresher. It's free. It's so fun. I played with it a little bit last week because I had not used it previously, but I'm going to start. Prezi is another one. I think there's a small charge for Prezi. It's a little bit more technical to use, but there's more movements in the slides, so it's more interesting. It's a little bit more modern, I think. And then Google Slides, I think people are more familiar with. It's not too different than PowerPoint, but if you can, there's all kind of sources online. There are interactive questionnaire games. There are all kind of free resources. Just, you have to be creative, but if you have teacher friends, ask them what they're using in their classroom, and don't be afraid to use it.
And what, Prezi, is that how do you?
Prezi, Prezi.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Kahoot is fun too. If you're looking for like an icebreaker activity, it's Kahoot. And basically you invite them to use their phones. If you have kids, they're probably using it in their classrooms. You can create mini quizzes and interactive things, and it'll keep track of everything on the screen, and it's got music, and it's super fun. And don't be, you know what, we're human. We may be all formal in the courtroom, but at the heart, we like the same kind of stuff. Don't be afraid to have fun because, again, you want to appeal to the emotions.
If you would hand the microphone to your right in front, and then we'll go to the back after that.
Hi, good afternoon. I have two questions. I have one question for Kansas. You mentioned having workshops on Fridays. What was the schedule like for the Friday?
So we try to let out like at 4 to beat traffic, sometimes 3:30 depending, but normally it's, like 8 basically to those times, and then building in the lunch panel as well.
And for Rebecca?
Yes.
I have a question about how did you use emotions? Can you give us an example of how you've used emotions to make the connections?
When I'm teaching emotional intelligence, mindfulness, resilience, and all of that sort of thing, that's typically a little bit more easy because we can start with meditations or breathing exercises. I can ask them to journal, which I build into presentations. If you're doing a more substantive legal presentation like my professionalism courses, you can still do that. Ask them to reflect on what the worst day in court was that they had. Ask them, what problems do you have? What's the worst experience you had with a judge? When I teach that diversion course, they come in very angry. They hate the bar. They do not want to sit through that class with me. We have a judge who comes and does a question and answer session with them for about 30, 45 minutes. Sometimes it gets painful, but sometimes it gives them a really good voice, and in the end, they're grateful. So you just have to kind of tap into those things. Let them vent, listen to them, and it can be in the most substantive of courses. If you're really sticking closely, for example, to the professionalism stuff, talk about what's the worst thing you've seen another attorney do? What angered you the most? Well, you remember the worst day you had in court. I still remember interning at the state attorney's office and the worst day I had in court, right? Those emotions flood in. Tap into it.
So I'm being given the time sign. I apologize, but I think Bill's going to come us and maybe give us the luxury of a break. It's no wonder why these three lawyer teachers are so good at what they do in court and out. So I thank them for today, and Bill, why don't you come on up?
All right, thank you, nuts and bolts, folks. I love the event-driven CLE. I'm going to remember that. That's such a good idea. We are up to our first break. We are literally only taking 5 minutes. It's really just to bring the next panel up. You can move around, you can relax, but it is 5 minutes, and we're starting with written preparation right after that. Thank you. All right, we are back, and our next section is on written preparation. So this is where we're going to help you figure out how to put together amazing materials for the amazing presentations that you're going to be given. The moderator for this segment is Ms. Juliet Rulock. Ms. Juliet is the regional director for Florida Power and Light, and just to share a couple of things with her about her with you, she's the type of person who really values ongoing education in CLE, which is why she's ideally suited for this type of role as a moderator for this segment. And she is also a speaker, not just locally, but also nationally. So we're very fortunate to have her as our moderator right now. I'm going to step down, and here is written preparation.
Thank you, Bill. As I was listening to the last panel, I realized how fortunate we all are. It was a great panel. We had such a great speaker, Kansas, that a great state has been named after her. So I do promise that we have some great panelists here for you as well. As we prepared for this, I was really impressed with their level of deep knowledge and also great ideas that they're going to share with you. So without further ado, I wanted to have the benefit of introducing to you our panel. First, we have to my immediate right, Ed Sheffy. Edward Sheffy practices on the West Coast and is a specialist in both civil trial law and business litigation law. He is a fellow in the American College of Trial Lawyers as well as the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. In 2000, he received what has got to be the best named award I've ever heard, the Lion of Law Award for professionalism for the Collier County Judiciary, certainly an honor from the judiciary. He has been voted by his peers as one of the top 100 super lawyers in Florida and is included in Florida Trend's Legal Elite Hall of Fame. On the professional side, he has been very much involved as chair of the Florida Bar's annual board certification review course for civil trial law and has lectured in the area of ethical issues facing the civil trial lawyer ever since 1996. So obviously, he's doing something very well there. He's a Harvard grad and got his law degree from Ohio State University. He practices with the Sheffy Pasadoma firm in Naples. Please help in welcoming Ed Sheffy. To Ed's right, we have Sheena Benjamin Wise. And she is wise indeed, as a South Florida practitioner specializing in marital and family law for over 15 years in the South Florida area across 3 counties. She completed her undergraduate studies at UM and obtained her law degree from Nova. And she has been very active in her profession as a member of the Executive Council of Family Law Section of the Florida Bar. She has served in numerous leadership positions in the section committees, including Children's Issues, the Legislation Committee Issues, to name a few. She currently serves as vice president of the Gwen Sherry Black Women Lawyers Association, a regional organization, and has leadership roles in the Broward BNI Networking Builders Association, as well as the Greater Pompano Chamber of Commerce. She also is not new to being a presenter and has been a guest lecturer and speaker all over the state of Florida on topics related to marital and family law. She has received numerous awards and recognitions, as well as the rest of panelists, including Florida Bar Family Law Section Rising Star Award, as well as the Florida Bar Family Law Section Keeper of the Flame Award, another good name. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Sheena To her right is Yoshimi Smith, who I will fondly call Yoshi. Yoshi is a co-founding partner of the law firm of Beller Smith, located right here in Boca Raton, so she just had to come around the corner for us. She concentrates in the areas of estate and tax planning, and as well as estate and trust administration and business succession planning. She's a graduate of Hofstra University Law School and the State University of New York, Stony Brook, and is admitted to practice in both New York and Florida State. She's very active in the Florida Bar as well and serves on the Real Property Probate Trust Law section of the Florida Bar, fondly known as Reptiles, and serves on several section committees, including the Estate and Trust Planning Committee, as well as the Ad Hoc Fiduciary Licensing Committee and others. She's a member of the Executive Council of Reptiles and the Vice Chair of the Probate and Trust Law CLE Committee as well. She currently chairs a probate committee. We're really fortunate to have her, as she's frequently asked to speak on tax and estate planning topics and has lectured and written on various trust and estate topics on a local, state, and national platform, including the NYU Tax Institute. Please join me in welcoming Yoshi. And last, but certainly not least, we have Samuel Walker. So Samuel is a partner in the CPLS PA in Orlando. He leads the firm's appellate practice group and is a member of the firm's litigation and business law practice group. He has over 20 years of experience and has worked with various notable firms, including Reed Smith, an international law firm with law offices throughout the United States, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, as well as having worked in the Federal Public Defender's Office in Montgomery, Alabama, where he was the appellate division chief. He also has served as a public defender in West Palm Beach and the government of the Virgin Islands, nonetheless, in the Department of Justice, where he served as Deputy Solicitor General responsible for civil and criminal appeals before the Supreme Court of the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Supreme Court of the U.S. State Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court of the United States. Quite a celebrated practice. He has handled many appellate matters, as you would imagine, and has appeared in virtually all the appellate courts in this jurisdiction, as well as the United States. In addition to his experience, he's a litigator and has represented individuals and businesses before state and federal trial courts, as again I said, all over the country. So with that, please join me in welcoming Samuel Walker. So in reviewing, we thought, although there are specific areas that our panelists will be speaking to, there are several common and general tips that they all felt were common throughout all their practice, their specialties. And so we thought we'd kind of review that with you first before deep diving into the special tips. So in general, we all agree that in preparing for this panel discussion, there were a key factor to preparing an effective webinar materials is knowing your audience. In doing so, you should step into the shoes of the attendees to visualize your materials and presentations from that viewpoint. This would, of course, enable you to structure your materials and presentation in the form which would be most helpful to your audience. Now, I must give a shout out and credit to Yoshi, who did include this very material in her written materials, so you don't have to take notes on this one because your written materials will, in fact, include these pointers. So with that, we're going to, her recommended approach is kind of the who, why, what, when, where, and how, right? So starting with who is your audience. Sheena, why do you think you would want to know who your audience is?
Well, it is vitally important, especially my specific areas, to talk to you about preparing for a panel discussion. So it is vitally important to understand why the attendees are in the room. You want to know what the purpose is, what was the purpose of the promise that was presented to them in the brochures or promotional materials. You want to make sure that you understand their level of experience with the topic area and what they're looking for to take away from that event.
Thank you. So perfect segue. Yoshi, just talked about why. So the who. So why is it important also to know why the audience is attending that particular CLE?
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. It really boils down to one simple question, all right? Do you want to be here or do you have to be here? All right? Just as simple as that, right? If the audience wants to be here, I know that you're going to be engaged. I know that you're going to listen. I know that you're going to want to hear what it is that I have to say and what the panel has to say. All right? If, however, you have to be here because you need CLE, because the Dove bars outside are really good, or because you're here for the networking, well, then maybe you'll be tuning in every once in a while. Why is it important for purposes of the written materials? Because the written materials are an extension of your presentation. It's actually where it all starts, all right? I don't want to make a pitch as to why this section of the, of the series is more important than the other, but this section really is the most important because at the end of the day, it's the written materials that are going to last for the years to come, all right? So that always starts with knowing your audience really well and knowing why you are here.
Thank you, Yoshi. So, Ed, we now know the who and the why. What does the audience want to know? What would you consider in wanting to know the answer to that question?
Well, I want to know what type of seminar it is. And at one extreme, many of you have probably been asked to speak at a luncheon seminar for your local bar. At the other extreme, I've chaired for years the board certification seminar for civil trial lawyers. Those two audiences want very different things. They want different oral presentation and they want different materials. And when I do my deep dive into preparing materials for a board certification seminar, I'm going to get more into the details of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Samuel, why is it important to know the timing of the presentation, when it is and how long the course of the CLE will last?
Well, obviously, you know, folks oftentimes don't really want to be at the CLE, so you don't want to go beyond the time limits that you have. So you want to make sure that you tailor your presentation to the specified amount of time.
Yes, and as I heard the earlier panelists mention, if you have a stretch through lunch, you might think of even timing on how to keep them there if it's going to end shortly after that. Thank you for that, Samuel. So where the presentation is also important in terms of the comfort level, the actual availability of AV equipment or whatever you may need to make sure that your presentation will be successfully received. So how do you get answers to those questions? Of course, we talked about working with the staff with CLE for the bar as you work through those CLEs, as well as certainly as the other panelists who are participating. Well, I'm pleased to report that this panel followed all their own advice, and so we asked those questions, and with that, we're going to begin the deep dive. So let's first start with Ed. Ed, what do you consider when customizing materials for a certification course?
Well, again, that goes back to who's your audience. And I'll start by saying when I'm doing the board certification materials, I know I'm actually speaking to two different audiences. And I've got a slide on this. My two audiences. Lawyers preparing for a test. And boy, you talk about folks who are attentive. I mean, these folks have done so much to meet the criteria just to take the test. They've taken 2 days off of work to come to our seminar. They've paid a small fortune to be there. They've got an opportunity cost. They're missing work. They want to pass this test. and it is a very attentive audience. It's a great audience. I've got a second audience in the same seminar, and it's usually 50-50 every year. Second part of my audience, experienced trial lawyers, many already board certified, who are there for a review and update. And they want different materials, and I don't think, am I taking my deep dive now? Or
Yes.
Okay, I'll continue with my deep dive. They want different materials. Now, at one level, both audiences want the same thing. And I was sitting and listening to the last panel and was thinking of the beauty of being at a convention with so many lawyers, because you were going to hear exactly opposite point of views on some things. And I heard, don't do PowerPoint. That's the opposite of my view. My view is you must, whether I'm speaking to a group or whether I'm doing a closing argument, I will never do a closing argument without graphics, without a multimedia experience. I think that's what people expect today. So I always, when I do a seminar, have a PowerPoint. And I think, contrary to a very articulate and well-spoken member of the last panel, I think at my board certification seminar, and I know from the comments, that's what I hear. Both audiences want that PowerPoint. They not only want to see it when I'm speaking, they want to have a copy of it in front of them because they want to be engaged, they want to take notes, they want to be involved. And with the PowerPoint, you can involve the audience and give them something to take home, give them something to write notes on. Both audiences at the certification seminar want that. The test takers want something else in addition. They not only want to learn for the 2 days they are there, they are going to be studying for weeks before that test, and they want a resource. And therefore, that resource that I give them is a very detailed outline. My outline now is about 100 pages. And I mentioned early on in response to the question, know your audience. If I'm speaking, which I sometimes do at a 20-minute luncheon presentation in Naples for the local bar association, the last thing anybody wants at a luncheon presentation is a 100-page outline. They're going to throw it away on the way out. But my audience at the certification seminar wants that. They want to be able to study it, and I tell them that I've worked on this for years. And I say, just study 2 things and you will pass the ethics portion of the test. Read the rules and study that 100-page outline. You're going to know it. That's all you need to do. But I've also found that my other audience, the already board certified lawyers, appreciate not only the PowerPoint while they're there, but they use the outline later as a resource. And it's something I use. I use my outline at least once a week. I'm pulling it out. Here is why, though. Here is why I think PowerPoint or Google Slide or whatever you want to use, but something other than just somebody talking is very important. Here's the main reason. I believe this. There are studies that show, how do you retain something? You retain so much if you hear it, you retain so much if you see it, but you retain so much more if you both hear and see it. So my rules for creating a PowerPoint, or my guidelines, you want to do something, and I think all the other panelists on the first panel agreed with this. It's certainly a basic rule of presenting. You've got to grab attention. You've got to do it quickly. And there are ways to do that. I think you want to give a preview. The old thing, tell people what you're going to say it, tell them what you've told them. I think that's still a very valid rule for presentation. And I, in my PowerPoint presentation, give the quick preview. I use charts and illustrations. I want to involve the stories. I agree completely with the speaker who talked about use emotion. I don't think you can win a trial without using emotion. I don't think you can keep an audience engaged without emotion. And you can do it even in ethics presentation. You can bring out emotion. You tell the facts of a recent case, and you pause and you let the lawyers think, could that have been me? Could I have been in that situation? And what can happen? What can happen now that this mistake was made? I think a key to PowerPoint slides is limiting the amount of information, and I believe in opening and ending very strong. Now, some quick examples. I begin my ethics. Every year I begin my ethics presentation by saying to the audience, I know you've invested a lot to be here. I've put dozens of hours into updating my materials. But my theme is the same every year. My theme is that the rules of ethics are not static. They're not constant. They are dynamic. They're evolving and changing. And to illustrate my theme, I'm now going to show you 10 issues that will be of interest to you, where there's a recent case or an ethics ruling that has impacted the answer to this question. And I give a couple of examples of those. And now I've got my audience. They now want to know the answers to these questions. I use PowerPoint slides to illustrate something that may be complex very quickly. We're all talking about professionalism now. What does that really mean? There's a document from the Board of Governors that explains it in some detail. In one slide, it is summarized there. And I think it's a very effective way to present information like that. One of the things I say, I try to involve my audience before I get into the substance about how important it is to know the rules of ethics. And one of the reasons I tell them the Supreme Court is getting tougher and tougher on violations. And I showed this chart where a referee recommended one penalty for a violation, and what's the Florida Supreme Court doing now? At least half the time, they're doubling down on the penalty. Here is where I try to show them I'm organized, and here's what's coming. And then here's an example of, here's an example of where I will give the facts of a recent case to try to involve them. And this is a fascinating case. There is a lawyer who makes a referral of a huge case. The lawyer who gets the referral says, I'll pay you a referral fee. The lawyer wins the case. There's a $500,000 referral fee. But guess what? There was no written agreement. The lawyer who made the referral left the firm he was with before the case was resolved. The lawyer who won the case said, here's $500,000. Who gets it? The law firm said, I get it. The lawyer who had left the law firm said, no, I get it. Who gets the referral fee? And so I end this slide with that question to try to involve the audience. Who do you think is going to get it? And here's the answer. The appellate court said, there's nobody without sin. Everybody was at fault. And we leave the resolution to another day. And I try to end strong with my theme. So, with the outline, and I'll finish with this, it's a very different presentation than the PowerPoint. Here are my basic rules for the outline. I put table of contents ? If you do presentations for the Florida Bar and submit materials, one of the lines there is, don't send us a table of contents, we'll do that. I've never been satisfied with the table of contents that the bar has added. So I lobbied for my group, for my audience, with a lengthy outline. I say, I need to give a very detailed table of contents so those test takers who want to go back and find a specific topic can get right to it. And it took me years, but now they print my table of contents. And it's very detailed. You can see the whole thing on the electronic presentation that you all should have received. So getting started, it can be daunting if you're putting together materials for the first time. Build on the work of others, but most importantly, I think it's all about attitude. And I'll tell you, when I was first asked to speak at a Florida Bar seminar, I thought, my God, I've just got one of the biggest honors, one of the biggest privileges. I'm so thrilled to do it. And I treated it as the most important case I had in the office. And I think if we do that, we can put together some great materials. And the other rule, and I'll truly end with this, the other rule I try to follow is people want to hear about current issues. And I try to make as much of my presentation as possible about something current. And I try to focus on practical issues, and it's really trying to steer a path between the obvious, which nobody wants to be bored hearing about what they already know, and the esoteric, which may be theoretically interesting, but nobody's ever going to deal with it. And you want to find that middle ground and talk about practical issues that will impact people's day-to-day practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. So now we've heard about how to present materials to an audience that are compelled to be there and are about to take an exam that is meaningful. We now have moved to Yoshi to talk about an audience that you can't control. You have no idea where they are and where they're looking at your webinar. Tell us about how you go about written materials for a webinar, Yoshi.
The best type of audience there is. You can't see them, they can't see you. All right, so before I kind of dig down into the webinar, let me explain to you just some general observations about just preparing written materials, all right? I mentioned before the importance of the written materials, right? It's the lasting effect out of any presentation. We've all sat through many, many presentations. We've all had really great speakers, some not so good, but at the end of the day, it's the written materials that really are going to last. So you have to put the sweat and tears into it, all right? It takes the most time of anything else. Right, sitting up here and doing the presentation, it's going to be, several minutes, but the materials that I prepared for you for today's presentation probably took me tenfold that time in order to get it ready. All right, so this is not the time where you're going to want to delegate that to somebody else in your office. All right, this is the time where you want to do it on your own. It's yours. Own it and be it, because you're going to need that not only to be able to do your presentation, but to also have it linger for many years to follow. All right, so what about a webinar? What is a webinar not? It's not a live presentation like we have here. It's not a panel. It's not a solo presentation. It is, you're speaking in real time. All right, so you are speaking to a live audience, because as I joked before, you can't see them and they can't see you. So it's kind of easy in that regard. You can sit in your pajamas if you wanted to. Can't say that I've done that, but if you wanted to, that's something that you can do. Now, why is that somewhat important? From a webinar standpoint, the biggest issue is selecting your topic. All right, there's a lot of webinars that are out there. The audience usually are signing up for that webinar for that one particular topic that may be of interest to them. So the most important thing that kind of gets wrapped into your written materials is the selection of the topic. Probably the most important thing. All right, you want to make sure that it's something that's novel, something that's new, something that's interesting, and something that's going to catch the person's eye. Because it is that's going to attract them and create your audience. You can't just rely, on the Bar Association or the organization that you're speaking for to generate that audience for you. Then after you've selected your topic, you have to have something interesting to say. All right, so you want to make sure that you're going to either drill down into that particular topic, or you're going to be a little broader with it. From a webinar standpoint, I've found that the most successful thing is you find a topic, but you drill down. Meaning the people that are watching that webinar are going to be interested in that one thing that attracted them for the topic. So for example, I did a webinar recently on how to modify an irrevocable trust. It's not an oxymoron, it can actually be done. All right, you have a trust that can't be changed, but you really can change it. But then when I spoke about the topic, which seems pretty simple, it's actually not, all right? There was tons of materials there, and that's the materials that I put in your presentation. There was 90 some odd pages worth of materials to talk about in that 1 hour. So pick your topic and make sure that it is complete and that you're really kind of drilling down on it. The other thing that you want to do is you want to make sure, as Ed stressed, that you have a PowerPoint. All right, absolutely critical. If you can't stare at a screen, all right, you have to have a PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint for webinars are probably equally as important as the written materials, because that's what the audience is going to be looking at all times. So what that does is, if you think about it, and always think about it from the audience standpoint, all right, I'm always thinking in your shoes when I'm up here, or doing a webinar presentation. Right? How is the audience going to perceive this and receive it? So one of the things that I like to do is I like to be slightly entertaining. All right, so let's go back to my webinar that I did on the modifying irrevocable trusts. Well, I said to myself, I don't necessarily know the level of depth of the attendance, of the people in the audience. So I drew an analogy during the entire presentation of a car that's broken, a car that needs to be replaced, and a car that just may need to be fixed, all right? And I drew that analogy throughout the whole entire program. It turned out to be very, very successful. So as you're doing those slides for your PowerPoint, all right, you can throw in all the cars in there that you want, from your Maseratis down to the junk car, all right, or the lemon. So you have to be very effective with that PowerPoint, presentation. Your materials have to be substantive. As I said before, you can't delegate. All right, so the webinar, the people are there to listen to that particular topic, otherwise they would not have signed up for that webinar. All right, they're sitting usually in their office, drinking some coffee during lunchtime or having their lunch. So the PowerPoint is important, and make sure that it is uberly substantive, because that's what they're there for. This is not the time for an entertaining presentation, in the sense that you're not going to have an opportunity, to throw in some jokes, tell them what you did yesterday or what you're about to do tomorrow. They don't care. All right, just give them the nuts and bolts. That's what it's all about. And then some, general practice pointers. All right, give everyday realistic situations. Give examples. All right, give examples, put those examples in the PowerPoint presentations. All right, when you use those examples, make sure that they're examples that you can actually use in your very own practice. So if you're making them very esoteric, they're not going to understand it or may not even follow it. All right, so make your example as practical as possible. Also, when you have the examples, give some solutions. Because oftentimes when we have problems, and it happens all the time in law, there may be a lot of issues that are out there. And yes, we may all be really good at spotting those issues, but from a practical standpoint, what do we do with it? So try and give some solutions as to what to do and how to handle that situation. Webinars can be a whole lot of fun, so I encourage you to give it a try, because out of all the different forms of presentations, me personally, it's one of the ones I enjoy the most.
Thank you, Yoshi. Great content suggestions, and it really made sense when I was listening to you. So we'll now move to customizing materials for live solar presentation. You're on your own. You're the whole roadshow. So Samuel, please share with us what you consider when you're doing materials for that.
All right. So one of the things that you have to do, you must do in order to create an amazing CLE presentation, is that you have to engage the audience. So the question becomes, how do you use your written materials to actually engage the audience? Well, from my observations, there are basically three broad kinds of handouts. You have the outline handout, you have the narrative handout, and you have what I call a working handout. So the outline handout is pretty self-explanatory. It basically has the subtopics that the presenter is going to address. One of the problems with this kind of handout is that it may actually be distracting, because instead of listening to your presentation, the audience may be reading the handout. So this type of handout may not help you very much in terms of engaging the audience. I'm not saying you can't have an amazing CLE presentation with an outline handout, but the point is that the written material, the handout itself, doesn't help you to engage the audience. So the second type of, broad type of handout that I've seen is the narrative handout. This handout is very detailed. It basically has all the information that the presenter wants the audience to have. The problem, again, with this type of handout is that it can be distracting, because very often you might have the audience reading the handout instead of listening to the presentation. This kind of handout is sometimes helpful because, for instance, you take it to your office, you file it away, 6 months later an issue comes up, you pull out the handout, and all of the information you need to address the issue is right there. But again, this type of handout doesn't really help in terms of engaging your audience. The third type of handout, which I call the working handout, is a handout that I think that you can use to actually engage the audience. The working handout is a handout that the audience actually has to use during the presentation. So a handout like this clearly is not going to distract the audience. It's actually going to engage the audience. So this is a type of handout, a good type of handout to use if you really want to try and engage the audience in the presentation. So in your materials, I provided an example of a working handout. That handout is a handout that I used a few months ago in a CLE presentation on recent appellate opinions. And basically what I did was I selected 10 to 15 cases that I wanted to tell the audience about. And I stated the issue in those cases in between 75 and 100 words. So in those 75 and 100 words, I had all the relevant facts, all the relevant procedural history, and the question that the court was asked to answer. Did the trial court abuse its discretion? Did the trial court err? And so it's a relatively short paragraph, 75 to 100 words. Then basically at the presentation, I would ask for a volunteer in the audience to read the issue presented. The person would read the issue presented, and then I would ask for a volunteer to say, well, how would you answer the question presented based on the relevant facts and procedural history? They would share their thoughts about that, and then I would ask for dissenting opinions. So the audience would then engage in a discussion as to what they think the correct answer, or what they think the correct answer to the question is, and they would provide their reasoning. Sometimes the audience would agree. Most of the times they would not agree. They would disagree as to how the question should be answered, or disagree as to the reasoning. So after they've done that for a while, then I would tell the audience how the court answered the question and what the court's reasoning was. And after I've done that, then we would probably have some further discussion about the court's opinion. Sometimes, of course, they would disagree with the court's opinion. They may have some further questions about the case, which I would answer. And so I don't know whether my CLE presentation was an amazing presentation, but I do know that basically that my written handout was very engaging. It engaged the audience. And so what I would encourage you to do in terms of your presentation, if it's possible, because depending on the type of CLE you're presenting, the working handout may not lend itself to that. But to the extent that it does, I would encourage you to use the working handout as opposed to the outline handout or the narrative handout. So in my CLE presentation, for instance, I could have used the outline handout, or I could have used the narrative handout, and I've seen it done those ways as well. But I chose to use the working handout approach, and that worked very well in terms of engaging the audience.
I absolutely see how that would be effective. I have to say that I have been in the audience at a CLE where a working handout was used. And there's also the option of kind of having paragraph form or leaving blanks in the middle of the information that you can only know or remember if you fill out. And I find myself intently waiting to hear the answer to complete it. So that's another way, and that's really wonderful. So now we'll move to Sheena, who is going to talk about customizing materials for panel presentations, much like we're attending now.
Yes. So as you heard from my esteemed co-panelists, there's a lot of work that goes into putting the material together. Yes, it's comprehensive. Yes, it's detailed. It provides you with case law, and you have all the material you need for your next trial or for another CLE. So those of you who are preparing a CLE, you hear the different styles that are presented to you today. We have PowerPoints. In a panel discussion, the audience is coming to hear these experts. They want to know about these particular people. They know something about their history or their background, and they want firsthand knowledge of these panelists. So you want to make sure that you have a really good introduction or detailed bio for them to provide the audience with the materials that they want. They want that information. They want to make sure that they can email that expert. They can find their website so they can gather more information for whatever it is, whatever that topic is. You want to make sure that when you're putting the packets together, you put it in a situation so that the participants are looking through the panel and not losing connection with the panelists. So the panelists are having a conversation with each other, or they're having a conversation with members of the audience. So the written material has to be organized in a way so that it supports that conversation. The most important element after the written materials in a panel discussion is the conversation itself. So it's really important that the moderator have the written materials as well, so that that moderator can facilitate that conversation and instigate that conversation. Maybe throw in some powerful questions for that panelist or for the audience. And that comes from the materials that you have in front of you. So some of the things that you might think about, if you have a panelist that has a PowerPoint, as the CLE organizer or the moderator, you might want to say, listen, I only want to have 5 per panelist so that the conversation continues to flow. There's not a break in that flow of information. You might also want to consider having a social media kind of interplay with your panelists. So when you have the materials, you have the conversation, and maybe they can ask their questions from their phones. Or it depends on what format you have set up for your audience. If your audience is set up so that there are microphones around the room and they're walking up to get to their experts and their questions, make sure that that's flowing. And one of the things that you don't want to happen in a panel discussion is a drop in attention or a loss of time management, because so many people are having these conversations, and making sure when you have the written questions available, you keep the questioner on task. You say, this is the question. And if they start to ask a question or start to go off, you bring them back as the moderator. You bring them back directly to the written questions that you have. So when you are organizing this kind of presentation, you make sure you are mindful of the agenda and you really kind of follow through that. So having that written agenda in front of you and making sure that everybody in the room is clear on how the presentation is supposed to go is part of your responsibility when you're putting together a panel discussion with experts, because all of them get to have an opportunity to speak. They're there for a reason. They get to share their knowledge, and you give them that opportunity. And it's really up to the organizer to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you so much for those comments, Sheena. Bill, I see you showing me 2 minutes. I think this would be a great time to open up to the audience for any questions you may have. Any questions? Yes.
Do we have any information on how many people outside of the certification context actually read the materials? Because when I go to a seminar and I've pre-read the materials, people look at me like I have 2 heads. And I'm wondering if we have any studies or anecdotal or inferential information, such as when the materials are put up for us to download, how many people actually do that?
I don't think we have that kind of
I don't have
information.
those statistics. I can only tell you from personal experience, I am one of those geeks that usually go back afterwards and looks at the materials. Sometimes they'll be of interest to me, sometimes they don't. Usually what spearheads that is the quality of the presentation of the speaker. All right, the speaker's going to say something, is going to, touch upon a topic that is going to be really interesting to you, and you're going to say to yourself, "Ooh, I really want to take a look at that." And then you look at the materials. I can tell you that I have materials that are, 20 years, from 20 years ago. Don't want to age myself, but it's there. It's still relevant today. It's still good material, but it gets you there as a result of the, the good presentation. But I have no idea what the statistics are. I think that's a fabulous question.
Yes, I do know that I also read materials, and what you'll find is often speakers speak in a more practical form, and the content of the materials is often more substantive, so you actually get deeper value, which is something people often miss. So thank you for that
Something
question.
I always want, but I was curious when we put the blood, sweat, and tears into those materials, and they stay in the back of somebody's car, they don't get downloaded.
And if I may say, that material, if it's quality material, like Mr. Shafee's material, if you're a certified, wanna-be certified individual, or really want to be good in court, you will tear his materials apart and organize it in a way when you're ready to go and you want to have that Dahlberg conversation, you pull his materials out and you go with it. So it's always relevant. It's always important.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, thank you. You have been an exceptional panel, as promised. Thank you so much, audience, for your attention. Please join me in thanking you.
All right, and we are back with our last and final segment. This panel we are calling What Makes a Great Presentation? Although we've been discussing that, we have some more good information about that topic for you, and another stellar panel. So this panel is headed up by our moderator, Ms. Pat Dawson. Ms. Dawson is a former prosecutor. She currently has a solo practice that focuses on criminal defense, and she is also a member of our the Florida Bar CLE committee. And now I'm turning it over to what makes a great presentation.
Good afternoon. Look, I know I got the fever, and I sure hope that y'all have the fever for speaker fever. All right now. Okay, attorneys are poet laureates and wordsmiths. They are honorary representatives of words. With their words, they supply the keys to the shackle, relief to the pain and suffering, financial restoration to the injured, and justice for those who have suffered injustice. This section of Speaker Fever, What Makes a Great Presentation, goal is to give you the tools to enhance the flow of words while you transfer your expertise to the masses. So sit back and let the fever of speaker flow through your mind while you learn about preparing a presentation, knowing your audience, engaging in your audience, incorporating technology, and of course, the do's and don'ts of a presentation. So let's get started. I am going to briefly introduce our panel today. Of course, he already said I am Patricia Dawson, your moderator for this section. We have Dale Swoop, managing partner of Swoop and Rodante, PA. We have Michael T. Davis, he's a member of the law office of Kuno and Davis.
Cuny Davis. Yeah.
Thank you. PA, thank you. And of course, I'm sorry, but she's my dean. She's Barbara Pittman's dean. Dean Aaron O'Connor of Florida State University Law School. Woo! And we have Stetson. I'm from Tampa and have to love them too. We have Professor Julie Metz, Director of Trial Practice at Stetson University College of Law. All right. Woo!
I was clapping for Stetson.
Oh. Huh?
I was clapping for Stetson.
It's a good Stetson.
That's all right. We still love you too. Seminoles love everyone. We're going to get right on into this. Thank you. We're preparing a presentation. Mr. Swoop.
Yes, ma'am.
You have decided to give a presentation. Can you tell us how you prepare a presentation?
Well, yeah. First, I think that there's one thing that's probably more important than anything else if you're going to be responsible for a presentation. And I bet these speakers here will agree with me. You have got, by all means, to put your best speakers in the last slot of the day. Nothing is as important as that.
We'll sign autographs later.
Seriously, I mean, it's everything that we have just heard. But I would say this, the only thing that I can say to add is this. Of course, you have to be a master of whatever your topic is that you're going to be, and of course you have to sort of know who your audience is to know what level you intend to hit at. But in addition to preparing your materials, I think it's critically important to prepare yourself, okay? Because I don't care who you are or how old you are, you're scared. Okay, you're scared because there's always somebody out there that knows something you don't know, and you're scared because you're going to say something wrong. You're scared because you're going to get tongue-tied. There's a lot of other things you can be scared of, no reason to go into them. And so I think that what you have to do is you have to prepare yourself, because of all the words you're going to say, none of them are as important as you and how you say them. You've got to convince these folks that you know what you're talking about. You've got to be entertaining to keep their attention. You know, I've read these same studies that say that in a crowd this big, at any particular time, 25% are listening to what the speaker is saying and thinking about it. 25% in a substantive lecture may be thinking about what the speaker previously said, and they're sort of applying it to their cases or something, but they're not really following. And the other half, 50%, are engaged in some kind of a fantasy. And all I can say from that is half y'all going to enjoy the heck out of this presentation. You know, I mean, the odds are with us. So that's what I do, prepare myself.
With this panel, any panelist can jump in at any time, and if you want to ask any questions at any time, just raise your hand, and definitely, hopefully, if I can see you, we'll make sure we recognize you. Anyone else have to add to anything to add to that?
Sure, you know, I will. So I do a lot of panels in the appellate practice area, so there are a lot of nerds, right? Anyone who knows anyone that's an appellate attorney, we're all nerds. And so I think for me, what I've learned is when I'm preparing, I understand that there more likely than not is a person in the audience who knows way more than I do, who has probably practiced maybe a few years longer than I have. And I'm always sure to make sure that I incorporate questions that I can ask the audience, because that's a way to actually help the audience be engaged. And it really, from the speaker's point of view, you just have to be willing to accept the fact that someone else can actually say what you're going to say and probably say it even better. And so I try to make sure that I always bear that. Then also I always try to put a little humor into my presentation, and I always make sure that I start off with a zinger. Something, whether it's a hypothetical, something that's exciting, and I get everyone smiling like you guys are smiling now, and then once they're smiling, then we're ready to go.
And for the record, that is Attorney Davis. so that when someone's watching us on a CD, at least the first time they can recognize their voices. So while they are working and listening at the same time, they'll at least know who's speaking. Dean O'Connor, is the introduction of a presentation important?
Absolutely. Critically important. I think you have about 8 seconds to capture the attention of an audience. If you look at attention span within an audience, usually it's the very beginning of presentation and the end of the presentation that have the highest attention levels. There are tricks for raising that in the middle, but the beginning is critically important for capturing the attention, providing a roadmap, introducing the theme and the level. Often at the beginning, you really want to just make sure the audience is familiar with 2 or 3 things so that you can move from there. So it sets the scene.
Anyone else have anything to ask?
So Julia Metz, let me just chime in on how you prepare for this. How many of you enjoy public speaking? Right? Like less than half the room. So I'm a trial lawyer by nature. This is what I did for 13 years after I graduated from Stetson before coming home to the Mecca of trial advocacy. But one of the things that I will tell you, just a shameless plug, is that I was a kid in elementary school who stuttered. So when the teacher called on me, I put my head down and I couldn't read. And I was a kid who wasn't comfortable speaking in crowds, and I was a kid who wasn't comfortable talking in large rooms and things like that. And for those of you who have a fear of public speaking, I'm here to tell you that it is a skill, not a gift. Right? And it is a trait that you can learn. One of the things this presentation has to be about is about you doubling down on some of those weaknesses. I know it sounds odd, but this is what I'm going to suggest to you, is that the next time you go to Publix or the grocery store, have a conversation with the cashier and the bag boy. Use their name tags and call them by name. Gauge how they receive you in the conversation that you're having with them. Are you putting them off? Do you feel too much like you're pressuring them? But if what you really want to do is to learn to speak and to be comfortable with speaking, then you've got to get outside your comfort zone sometimes, right? And you've got to think about the impact that you have on others. There are those of us who love to speak and don't care about the impact that we have on others. We don't make great trial lawyers, right? So the other thing that I will challenge you to do, even if you do like to speak, start asking your friends and your family how they feel whenever you talk to them. Are you the person who consistently interrupts other people? Because remember, this presentation thing is a skill. And there are lots of things that we can do in our everyday lives to get us ready for this moment whenever we speak and persuade and advocate in any room that we are in, because that's what lawyers essentially do.
I think that's some great ideas, but if you have a brother like mine, you do not want to ask that question because you are not like the answer.
Elected family members.
Professor Metz, is defining a goal of a presentation important, and why?
So absolutely, it's important, right? So I talk about Brown versus Board of Education with young lawyers, but I also talk about it every single year with my son's school. So he gets older, so now we're up in middle school. So my audience and my goal for the kids who are in middle school is very different than the way that I'm going to talk about it with law school students. So I want to define that goal for myself going in. If I'm talking to young students, what I want them to get away from that is I want them to have a passion for being change makers and realizing that feeling sorry for a situation isn't enough. How do I move them to action? Right? How do I invoke those emotions in young students about what it is to be a good steward as an American of the gifts and the moments that we have to affect great change? When I'm talking to law school students, number one, I'm trying to keep them awake. Right? And number two, I need them to retain some of the facts and the analysis. But if I don't define that goal early on, I'm going to talk too much about facts with the younger kids and not enough about facts and analysis with the older audience. So identifying that goal is very important. The same for you with your CLEs. If you're going to do a 75-minute presentation and you want them to have a takeaway where they start to enjoy the subject matter, you're going to focus a lot on grabbing attention and giving them little nuts and bolts. Because if you overwhelm them with material, like a certification level course, you could actually scare them away from the content. So we have to identify what our agenda is going in so that we modify the material and the presentation to adapt to that audience.
All right. Attorney Davis, why should a presentation have a theme?
Well, I think the theme actually, so it puts it all together. It connects all of the points. So if I'm doing an appellate seminar, the main theme is how do I make sure that I don't blow the deadline? How do I make sure I comply with the rules? And that it actually becomes a very effective theme that you can actually weave in throughout your presentation. So I think defining the theme, whether it's going to be a funny theme, a don't mess up theme, or a you don't know anything theme, it matters because that theme is how you draw in your audience. So I think it's important that you identify the theme, stick to the theme, and be sure to weave that theme in your presentation, particularly in the middle when people tend to just drop off.
Anyone have anything to add?
When you're picking no, Dean, you go first.
I just wanted to say, last weekend I was at a conference that had a speaker who was a professional coach, and she placed 60 words on a screen, read through each word one at a time, but they were disconnected, and then asked us to write down how many words we could remember, and most folks remembered 5 or 6 of those words. Then she told a disjointed story with a number of words on the screen and asked us to list all the words we could remember, and most of us improved to 8 or 9 or 10 words. But then she put a coherent, themed story on the screen and asked us how many words we could remember, and we were up to 25 or 30. So it makes a big difference on the audience.
Professor?
I think along the lines of having a theme, right, that's that catchphrase, and then you want 3 words that people can come back and associate with consistently, right? So if you have a theme and we're talking about catching the fever, right? And we want presentations to be smooth, powerful, persuasive. I'm going to have the theme and I'm going to plug the words all the way through. You're going to come back to those themes and those key words later on. We use this tactic a lot with juries because we want them remembering those things whenever they go back into the jury room. We are all human beings, right? So you want your audience to remember not only the theme, but a couple of key words that you can plug in strategically throughout it that can trigger a memory in a moment for them to come back to that material later.
Okay. We know that you need to have an introduction, a roadmap. We also know how important goals are because we want to be able to achieve the goals, like we have outlined our goals with each topic at my introduction. And also you've been told how important themes, because themes make sure that people remember and it gives repetition. So now we want to discuss knowing your audience. Let's see. Attorney Davis, why is it important to know your audience?
Yeah, so when you think about knowing your audience, you want to know your audience so you know how to present to them, right? I think the skill, right, and the strength of being a good speaker is that you understand the audience and you're able to communicate to that particular audience. So if you're doing, a Bible study at church or leading a group, generally people in church or people who are faith, they know the Bible to a certain extent. So that shapes how you do the conversation. You can have a discussion style where everyone sort of has like a foundational knowledge. If you're talking to kids and you're talking to them about, the Constitution, we do our speaker things that we do with Florida Bar to schools. These are kids. They may not understand the Constitution. So how you present it is very different. You have to be very basic. You might have to have some games in there, and you're just going to have to do it differently. If it's a high school or a college, it's also going to be different. If you're dealing with lawyers, same thing applies. So I think you have to understand what your audience is so that you can effectively communicate to them what it is you're there to present.
Anyone has anything else to add?
Talking about going to church reminds me of an important point. By the way, every time I go to church, they're always talking about the same thing. It's either Christmas or Easter, Christmas or Easter.
So we know you go to church 2 times a year. 2 times you're one of those people.
Mix it up a little bit. Listen, I don't know if this exactly, if y'all watched the Democratic debate last night, it's not important to actually answer the question that's been posed to you. But it triggers this idea to me that, we all understand that we can lose the attention of our audience and then you're not doing any good at all. I do think outlines are good for that. PowerPoints are good, and they should be designed in a way for the people who have been drifting so they can kind of come back. Where are we at? And so I always put a heading on the top of the PowerPoint. We're talking about hearsay, and we're talking about the excited utterance exception, and here's something about what we're talking about. So they got it cool. Like I was never gone. I've been here the whole time. But that's not what I want. What I want to talk about is you can, especially in an after lunch program, okay, everybody's blood sugar's taking a dive. There's not enough caffeine, there's not enough cookies to make that okay. People are out, man. And so what you have to do is you got to amp that energy up. If you listen to these speakers, these people are all naturals, and so they're not thinking about it. But if you're new to this, you have to learn the skills of an actor. You have to learn to change your voice dynamic. You have to, I don't want you to end up so contrived that you sound like one of these Stetson trial team people that walk in there. Because they're very identifiable.
By that #1 ranking, we are identifiable.
#1 ranking.
Yes, we are identifiable. #1.
They are #1. They are #1.
I'm sorry.
And my law school is graduating.
Max must have something to say on this topic.
My law school has 1/3 pass rate at the Florida bar. I get it.
Oh.
But practice
every time.
Practice this. Not only talking to the lady at Publix, but practice taking a sentence and saying it different ways, Practice saying like, I notice that the time is now 27:31. You could say, I notice that the time is now 27:31. And that means one thing, right? I notice that the time is now 27:31. That implies we've been waiting for a long ass time, right? And so I notice the time is now 27:31, and that implies a level of precision because I'm putting my emphasis on those numbers. And you can do the same thing, change the speed at which you talk. It means something if you pick up the notes and you're talking in a staccato way and you kind of bringing the energy home compared to if you slow everything down, you lower your tone, and you get a little bit more intimate and a little bit more personal with people. You're saying something, the words are all the same, but the way you're saying them. And I will often tell my young lawyers, go to church and listen to the preachers, right? Their job is so much more difficult than yours. No.
I say, especially the only
your job is to ask a jury of strangers to give my client somebody else's money. That preacher's got to ask people to give up their own damn money. Now, who's got the hard job? Listen to the preachers, even if you're not a religious person. I have a church catty-cornered of my office, and when I'm down there studying on Sunday for a trial, we go to church.
That's your excuse why you didn't go to church. Huh?
That's my excuse.
But Attorney Swoop, Professor Mass would like to know where you attended college.
The University of Florida, ma'am. Like I said, we have a 1/3 pass rate in the Florida bar at the present moment.
It happens. Everybody's got to go there, I guess, sometimes. Yeah, those who aren't #1 in advocacy have to have something. So let's. I do, though, want to take it back to this idea about, though, talking to pastors and doing all of those things, because it's real, right? Whenever we watch people present who appear to be natural presenters, we want to adopt their style. And one of the things I will caution you against is adopting anyone's style but your own. You have to be authentically you. Some people can make jokes and not come off a certain way, and other people cannot. Some people are very methodical in their presentations, and other people are not. So watch people and play with that voice inflection and the intonation in your tone and all of those different variations. If you don't record yourself while you're preparing for a presentation, you're doing yourself a disservice, and then go back and watch it. If you have ticks or tags, the ums and the yeses and the okays, ask your friends when you're having a conversation to interrupt you and to raise their hand so that you will see, because that's one of the things that we do in our courses at Stetson, is that we will indicate to people when they have those tics and things so that we can correct those. But it is a skill, right? And you want to be very careful not to adopt someone else's personality, because that's a really good way to go wrong quickly. But you do want to be engaged in different styles so that you can learn which style suits you best and finding your own voice.
Professor Mass, Attorney Davis already touched on also knowing the skill level or the knowledge of your audience. Suppose you are actually putting on an advanced seminar, but you also have maybe some middle ground individuals of knowledge of your topic. How do you educate the individuals that are not advanced?
So and it's interesting that you asked, because we were on a conference call this morning with the Virgin Islands, because we're getting ready to travel down for the Virgin Island Bar and do a 2-day courtroom training for these attorneys and their lawyers. And we're going to have a mix of very young lawyers to very seasoned litigators in the same room. Sometimes when we're giving presentations, there's some general information that crosses all the boards, right? So you want to make sure, if you're talking about legal updates, that you hit all the legal updates, because regardless of your experience level, everyone needs to know what's up and coming and what's current. One of the things that you can do is the audience engagement. If you have people who are experts in the field, and you're going to know them when you work in the same area, engage those people to educate your younger audience members and get them participating by asking rhetorical questions or asking questions of the audience. Really use their expertise to bring the middle ground up to that next level. And it also helps foster mentorships and things like that later on down the road.
Dean O'Connor, you have anything to add?
I think depending on how much time you have, you can form groups with more experienced and more knowledgeable folks and less experienced and less knowledgeable folks, and that interaction can keep everyone very much engaged, I think,
Absolutely.
in the process.
Okay. Well, this leads right up to our next topic, engaging your audience. So why don't we start with you, Dean O'Connor, since you used the last word about engaging your audience. How do you do that?
So I think, Patricia, that your introduction modeled all the things you want to do to engage your audience. You started with something that would capture our attention. You evoked emotion. You use very positive body language. If you're hunched over or you're nervous and you're back from the audience, that sends a message that you don't really want to be there, you're not comfortable being there. But if you're open with your body, if you're calm but positive, then that helps to draw the audience in. In terms of actual engagement, we do this at the law schools all the time. The Socratic method, asking a lot of questions, putting a problem or a hypothetical up and having folks talk about it, I think is an incredibly useful tool for an entire room if you're careful about the way you do it.
Attorney Swoop, we know you engage audience with humor. Do you have any other tools how you engage the audience?
Yes. I mean, I engage the audience frankly. Like, I pull them up, like, come on, let's come up here for a minute. One of my favorite things to do, I do a lot of things on trial work. And I take nothing away from Stetson's trial team. They're phenomenal. My partner, Stephanie Miles, is a graduate of that. And so, yeah. But for example, I like to point out, and presentations are like being in court. They really are. But in court, I'll point out that you want to use tactile stuff. You want a brain injury case. If you get a calf brain, like a dead baby cow, and you go cut its brain out of its skull. You can bring that into the courtroom to show a jury. You wouldn't believe how delicate your brain is. You think it's this big hard plastic thing, but it's not. If you take the dura off, it gets goopy and it would fall down between your fingers, and everything you know, everything you are is contained within that goopy mass, within electron connections so mild that a AA battery will short them all out if you directly connected it to it. So I'll get an audience member to come up. They don't know what I'm about to ask them to do, and they'll come up and I'll say, hey, would you help me? And people will always say, yes, fools. And first thing I do is I give them a blue glove, a latex glove, so that they won't get that junk on their hands. And then you say something like, so my case was about a failure to diagnose prostate cancer. And that is slow. But no, you pull that out, or I'll I'll go out and demonstrate how you shouldn't cross-examine an IME doctor, and how you gotta not be so mean. And because you want to be mean, because your energy, you hate this guy, this stupid guy. He's out there, he's from Yale University, and he's killing your case, and he's lying to the jury, and he knows he's lying to the jury, and you don't even know how to start the guy. And so I am not bashful to engage I don't have the skills that our other speakers do, and I have to resort to cheap parlor tricks, I guess is what you would say.
Okay, I know Attorney Davis, it's going to be hard to follow that, but you said that you were an appellate nerd. So how do you keep your audience enthusiastic, laughing, interested, appellate nerd?
Well, so, as of late, and, I did this, I think I've done this.
That sounds like such an appellate thing. As of late.
Well, I think it's been very effective. So this is my what I've done. So if you're on a panel with me, don't do it, because then you'll take it away from me, right? Midway through, or even between topics, I might just get one of those GIFs or GIFs. I don't know how you pronounce it. GIF, I don't know. But, this little thing. And so, it could be like, the cat, and there's like a funny line. And so I do something like that, and it's funny. And a meme, thank you, a meme.
It's okay,
I'll
you're
use
cool.
a meme.
Wait a minute, which one is younger?
I should have brought an example. But yeah, so literally I'll put that in the presentation, and you'll be surprised that things aren't going well, or if it's getting a little dry, because a lot of what we do, if it's a substantive presentation, you're just going through very boring rules, and oh my gosh, how do you make a rules presentation fun? It's not a whole lot you can do. It's just the transitions is where you can really bring the back in. So you put a meme or something funny or make a joke, and it pops up on the on the PowerPoint, and then everyone laughs, and then a reset, and then we continue.
All right, everyone, I have a very sore neck and throat.
Oh,
I need an attorney. Dean O'Connor, how do I prevent, how do I prevent that?
I think Julie's probably more expert at this, because I'm guessing she trains us all the time. But what I do personally is just take a break. You can use silence to let the audience catch up with what you're saying, and you can use silence to figure out what you want to say next, and you can skip the ums in that circumstance.
Professor Mike?
So you have to get comfortable with the silence in the presentation and allow the audience an opportunity to, get to where you are. And what you'll notice is that if it is a problem for you and something that you do a lot, like, okay, yeah, or if while someone is speaking to you, you're the person who nods, just waiting to interrupt them, those are things that you have to be self-aware about, right? I didn't pop out speaking this well. I'm a product of Stetson. I say that because it really is a skill, and if you're serious about wanting to speak well in order to persuade, and I encourage my teenage daughter to want to speak well, so whenever she wants to encourage me to buy her a car, she needs to be persuasive. So it's skills that we use every day, but those are things that I would rely on your family members and your friends, and when you're getting ready to give a presentation, you should record it. Watching those recordings is painful. Right, but it is necessary, and it will help you get there. But being comfortable with the silence, one of the most powerful moments in a presentation is when you ask a question, and you just wait. You make real eye contact with people, and you just wait. Those moments don't come naturally. You have to practice that, and it's a skill set to be able to make eye contact and not be afraid of it and move to the next person and know when I've got you, and then wrap it right back up and come right back over here. Those are things that if you work in a law firm that has any number of people, practice. Practice with your secretaries and your paralegals, because they're so much more real than the lawyers are. And if you can connect with them authentically, then you'll have a better shot of being able to give presentations and to understand that process. But don't be afraid of the silence, and practice the silence.
Attorney Davis, I wanted to ask about technology, but since I see Dale Smoot may be younger than you, since you didn't know what mean was, maybe I should go to him first.
It just punches all day up here.
So, Attorney Swoop, how does technology enhance the presentation?
It can either enhance it or it can get right big fat in the way of it, and there's absolutely nothing worse than when technology fails. I've been up there a bazillion times and had embedded, implanted, like, you know, I love putting movies in PowerPoint shows because movies all remind us. We saw them, you know, like the one with, y'all too old to remember this movie, but Unforgiven with, what's the guy that talked to an empty chair? He went crazy. Clint Eastwood. You know, and talking about not being nervous because there was a line in there where his enemy said, it's not about the one that can draw the fastest. It's the one that doesn't panic when things go wrong. He's the one that'll kill you. And so I was explaining this and I hit the button and just literally nothing will happen. And so you hit it again and nothing happens. And it's like, damn it, this works so good in my office. And you hit it. So you're left to try to paint a word picture. And that's just never quite the same. So I don't like to count on technology. I don't believe PowerPoint should ever be just the words that I'm going to say. I don't believe that they ought to be a bunch of citations to law. I use them for graphics. I use them for charts. They can show relative things and connections. That's what they're awesome for. Talladega Nights, you know, that scene y'all remember where he's like, you know why I think you should drive, Ricky? Because it's who you are, because you were born. I won't do the whole scene, but it's like that. And so I love those, but not just words, and don't ever put yourself into a position where that's all you have. There was a time, yes, ma'am. You want me to do the Ricky Bobby thing? I'll do Ricky Bobby. I'll do the whole thing for you.
The question was, what if you were doing a live webinar?
I hate webinars. I can't talk to nobody, okay? I mean, I feel like it's like the guy in the bathroom that's got the thing in his ear and he's talking and you're not sure if he's crazy or if he's got a cell phone connected
Attorney
to
Swoop,
it.
you're showing your age now.
Okay, oh, yes. Well, I'm about to show it even worse because there was a time when it was really important to give citations out to people because finding the right case, that was like a nugget, man. Like when legal research, and none of you in this room are old enough to know this, but you used to not have computers, And legal research was like going in the library, and the word shepherdized, that's a thing. That was a book set, okay? And you would pull them down, and there'd just be tables of numbers, and these numbers all had meanings to law students. And we had whole semesters devoted to how to use that system, and there was really no word search capability. So finding the citation to the right case was gold. And so passing that along in a seminar meant everything. Well, that's just not how it is anymore. If I tell you Burgess versus Infinity, that's all you need to know, and you will go find it from there. So I would never put them in my outline. Don't clutter the things with that. Don't say a citation. They're in the outline. If they're not in the outline, seriously, let me Google that for you, and I'll find it, okay? That's all it really requires.
Okay, Attorney Davis, Attorney Swoop hate technology. So can you tell us an effective way to use technology?
Sure, yes. So when I think of technology, particularly when it comes to PowerPoints, I think there's really like three purposes. One, it shows that you're organized. Two, it can also give you like a sense of credibility, particularly if you're like new to presenting. You have a nice PowerPoint that's organized. I think the person that's watching you present thinks that you know what you're doing and that you're well prepared. And then three, I think it can also be a source of engagement. And so when I think of technology, I think it sort of gives us those three things. I will say when I'm in court, it's very important to always, and even if you're doing a presentation, it's very important to make sure that you have the technology together. The reality is that technology not going well implicitly implies, if there's a such thing, implicitly implies, right? That you don't necessarily know what you're doing. So I think it's just always very important to, like, if you do it and you're gonna do a presentation, get there early. Even if you're the afternoon person, get there at 8:45 in the morning, get with the bar person and say, hey, let's make sure that this works. I have a video, let's make sure my video works. Even before you send it in, you might consider taking it out of your computer, putting it in a laptop, and then doing a test run that way, because it could be that it works on your computer, but it doesn't work on another computer. So I think those are some of the things that you can do with technology in terms of making sure that it goes well. For my PowerPoints, and I'll give you this other nugget, what I did a long time ago, so we're a small firm, and we didn't have a marketing person. And so what I did was I actually created a template for our firm. And so with PowerPoint, believe it or not, you can create your own firm template. And so, the title says CUNY Davis Law. Before I was a partner, it would say Law Office of Benedict P. CUNY. And then all of the other slides, the name and logo sort of fades, and then we go on that way. And I actually created that. And so if you ever see a presentation that I've done, that PowerPoint shell that gives credibility and engagement and organization, I actually put together that template. So that's another thing that you can also do with technology. So sort of like learning how to use the technology to help you get on with it, as they say.
Can I say one more thing about that? I'll give you all a clue. Seriously, the whole thing in federal court is that they're very proud of this technology that they bought about 12 years ago. And it has touch screens, and they think it's so awesome, it's horrific, but they won't let you bring yours on in. And so get used to it. They're Elmos, they're document cameras. They can't put an entire document on the screen at the same time, so you have to say, can you read the first half of this document with me? Thank you. Let's look at this at the bottom half now. And you have to do it like that. State court, completely different. You can bring yours in, and there's a name. There's something called a Mondo pad, M-O-N-D-O pad. It's better than a Google board, Google Jamboard, because it weighs about a third of what the Jamboard weighs. Big, huge iPad-looking thing. You can make presentations on it, connect straight to the internet. It's touchscreen. You can draw on it, and you can transport it in and out. That's, if you're going to do that, use your Mondo pad as your tool.
Connor, Attorney Swoop just went into, when he said about the Elmo, when is technology distracting?
I think it can be distracting if it's too busy, if it tries to convey too much information at a time. It can be distracting to the speaker because if you're not with your audience and moving with your audience because you're wedded to the plan that you made ahead of time, you're going to be a lot less effective. So it can be distracting in that way as well. Can I add one neat piece of technology that is being used a lot in college classrooms and increasingly in law school classrooms? Older audiences might not be super comfortable with this, but there is polling software that is freely available that you can ask your audience to answer polls by phone, and it's super effective when you want the audience to be honest and fully participatory, but for some reason they might not be. Either it's a controversial issue and they might not want to out themselves, exactly how they think about something, or they don't want to confess that they don't understand something, or they don't want to confess that they've had enough and they want to leave, whatever it happens to be. But polling, that software is fantastic. You can get immediate responses, and your screen can show pie charts. It can show the information or the responses put together in many ways, and it's really useful to the speaker to get a sense of where the audience really is and where to go from there.
Can I add something, by the way? I wanted to address the webinar question. So I was asked to do a webinar about 2 years ago. It was my first time. And I tell you, webinars are different to the extent that when you're in person, you can make a joke and someone laughs at you, and you can look and see if you're being engaged, if you're engaging the audience. When it comes to a webinar, you don't get any of that, and you really just have to be confident in what you're saying, have a script, stick to the script, make sure your outline's very good. You can try to put some humor in there, but just understand the humor isn't for you. The humor is for them to laugh with themselves, right?
Professor Mass, I have 2 things for you. I would like to first you to speak about how to make PowerPoint more visual or any other form of technology. And then secondly, I would like you to talk about Stetson training for speakers and stuff like that.
All right, so first to PowerPoints, computers, and visual aids. Number one, you have to know the room that you're in, right? And so when we talk about a lot of times with jury trials or in rooms like this, if I have a PowerPoint and it's going to be on this screen and I am presenting from over there, I may have to strain to look at that in order to engage with you, or I'm going to be down in my laptop looking at my PowerPoint instead of engaging with you. So that is a technology problem. Right, so now the technology, because of the room that I am in and where I would be standing, right, that creates a problem. So then I need to adjust. I need to come down here and do the presentation singularly just down here, have my notes over there if I need them, but engage with you, look at the PowerPoint with you, and then come back with you as an audience and bring you back to me. If you're putting, if you've got 30 to 40 slides and you have tons of words and information on there, and that's a problem for you. Your audience can't read it quickly enough, right? So here's a book I would suggest that if you're into presentations and want to do it, it's called Moonwalking with Einstein. It's about memory hacks and techniques and things like that that we use in order to tap into our brain. I know it's old school and it's old tech, but flip charts and markers work phenomenally well because audiences engage with what they can see happening in front of them. And if you use that in conjunction with the photographs and the videos from the PowerPoint to keep that activity and engagement on, you're going to increase retention of the material for your audience. Again, it's knowing your goal. If your goal is to get through the 75 minutes so they have a little bit of an understanding, that may not be as important to you. But if your goal is maximum retention, you may want to consider writing things out on whiteboards, some words and things like that to work from, because that's going to actually increase retention with the audience in conjunction with the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint should be minimal, very minimal. It should be keywords and phrases for people to come back to, and then you discuss it in an interactive fashion. None of us have a problem reading, right? We got through law school. So the idea of someone putting all of this information on a PowerPoint and reading it at us it just tunes us out automatically. So think about that when you're doing your PowerPoint. The last thing I'll say about PowerPoints is you have to know why you're making it. If you're making it out of fear, then it's a problem. If you want to put all the information up there because you are afraid to engage with your audience and have a conversation with them, that's a problem. So you first need to master that presentation portion of it. If you're like, well, if I mess up speaking, at least they'll have the information there. You've built in a crutch that's going to mess up your presentation. So you want to pare down the PowerPoint and double down on the presentation strengths and skills that you need to build. Last part of that is what I will say is that in doing this program with Ms. Dawson and Elaine Thompson from the CLE chair, we've seen a need at Stetson for us to help in this area. So we have green room studios. What we've offered to do and volunteered to do is to help people who want to do CLE and they're afraid of presenting, right? To allow Stetson to be the mentorship, the leadership in that particular program. So what we'll do is we'll be putting some information up on our website, much like NALA does for the elder law attorneys with their faculty advisor committee for the CLEs themselves. So we are going to create trainings and we're going to create mentorship relationship with young lawyers so that we have people in a continuing flow of people who want to present and to give CLEs, and for older lawyers who haven't done it before but want to do it in the future. So that's one of the things that our new dean has allowed us to jump into, and it's just a way to make the bar better. I mean, the bar is better when all of us are better, so.
Go Stetson.
That's wonderful.
Go Florida bar.
All right.
Here's my shameless pitch to all of you is that lawyers are the change makers in our country. And in every time of unrest, it has been lawyers who have fought for change, whether it's voting rights and women's rights and civil rights and all of those things. Politicians give speeches and lawyers litigate and make change. So kudos to y'all for doing what you do and allowing us to present to you today.
Like I said, you can ask questions at any time, and we're about to go on our last topic unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Dale and Julie have kind of touched on this already with Dale's, brain in his hands thing and Julie's flipboard. But how much room is there for a little bit of theatrics in a CLE presentation? It's not something I've seen done very much, but I'm kind of reminded of maybe Gore's Inconvenient Truth, where he rides a cherry picker up a chart. Something like that, maybe.
My honest answer to that is that there is as much room for that as your personality allows. So when I just recently did a presentation at Honors and Awards for the law school, and Honors and Awards is pretty, that's the name and that's the award. And I went back to my roots and went to church. And we had a good time. We had interaction from the audience. We had participation from the graduates. And it was one of those things, but it fit my personality and it fit that moment. You can do what is in your personality to do, but one of the things you want to balance is that you want that to be the attention getter, the middle of the road re-engagement, but you never want that to be the substance of what you're doing. You want it to be a moment. And that's the problem sometimes, like with themes, we get carried away with themes and we forget substance. The theme is there to enhance the substance. The theatrics is there to enhance the substance and to re-engage people. But you get to do what your personality lets you do.
Any other questions?
You can't seriously ask that question of me, man. There's no limit to it, because I believe I try to teach by showing and rather than by telling. And so the types of things that I typically teach are easy to demonstrate in a big crowd. And so it goes right there.
You know, I've presented a few CLEs, and sometimes the topic I want to cover seems to be much larger than the time someone can comprehend it. Do you have any suggestions on how to break down, if I only have 20 minutes to have a powerful presentation, and then I got to change the modality in order to have something that can be absorbed in a different way? How do you suggest breaking down such a massive area that the bar may say, in order we want these things covered? You're going, great, and I have how long? And you want me to do this in the following way and keep them engaged and have them learn something. So my question is, how, as professionals, do we present that in a way that's engaging and powerful and still have them comprehend it?
So one of the things that you want to do is think about the time frame that you have. If you have 20 minutes with people, I don't know that you need a board and that you need PowerPoints and that you need that. I think what you need is what the gentleman in the last panel spoke about, is that working outline that we get to engage with. You give them that information. One of the important things with that is to tell them ahead of time, you know, this is a dense topic, so we are going to scratch the surface. But my hope is that by the time we're done, you're going to go back and find the rest of it yourself. And if you have any questions, here's my contact information. But you let them know ahead of time, we are scratching the surface and here are the topics that we're going to hit together. And this is the area where I'm going to need you to follow up later on, because you are, after all, a lawyer. And we do expect you to do some research on your own. But I think being honest in the beginning, as opposed to trying to, and I want to talk to you about these 15 different topics, and we're going to have to get through this one in number 1A, B, paren, C, little 2I. That's going to be that important one that they tell us we got to cover, and I want to go ahead and get that one to you now. So identify the big rocks, the things they have to know, and tell them in the beginning that you're scratching the surface and that they need to follow up on their own. But if you're talking about a 20-minute time frame, I wouldn't mess it up with demonstratives and things like that. I would double down on the presentation and making sure that you're engaging with them with that working outline that they can take home for the rest of the material.
Okay, our last topic was do's and don'ts. And for technology, we pretty much went into details in the do's and don'ts. Dean O'Connor, what are some of the do's or don'ts for a great presentation?
Well, I think I talked about the effect of your body language, and we've talked about using your voice. We've talked about engaging the audience. I hope that makes clear that means you have to look at your audience. I've heard so many times be told, if you're nervous, just look above the audience. But you can't read if you're looking above the audience. I think it's really important to look at the audience. I think it's important to ask questions. You might take volunteers to answer the questions, or you might just pose a question and leave some silence for your audience to think. and then start analyzing yourself, but at least you're actively engaging your audience. I like the idea of taking questions along the way. I don't like, okay, I'm going to run through for 30 minutes and take questions at 10. If I know there's 4 points I want to try to get across or 4 topics I want to cover, after topic 1, I will say questions. Topic 2, questions. Because I think if you've lost your audience, then moving on becomes nearly impossible. I think those are the most important for me.
Anyone have anything to add?
Sure, I had something. I think you have to remember the fact that generally when you're asked to speak, there's a person that's the program director or the person that's putting it on. So we want to make sure that you do what they tell you. So with all of these things, it's true, right? There's a deadline, right? Get your materials in on time. If you're not going to get it on time, let them know ahead of time. Like I try to always get my outlines done and my PowerPoint done on time. If not, I make sure to communicate. If it's an everyday communication until I get it done, I try to make sure that I assure the person who's asked me to be on the panel that I care to be there, that I'm happy that you've asked me, and that I really do find what you've asked me to do is important. And then also too, I think just don't go over your time. If it's an hour, you may feel that you have a lot more to talk about, but if you go over your time, then you're taking away from the other speakers. And then also for the program director who's putting it on, they're now dealing with the situation where their program is going late as well.
I always see those sort of things as guidelines.
Okay, unlike Dale Swoop, Attorney Swoop, I don't like to go over time. I'm a time master. So I would like for us to be within our time, and it is 5:26. And I really want to thank our panel. I think this seminar, the CLE seminar, Speaker Fever, was a great, great seminar. We had some wonderful panels. I am biased. I do believe this was the best panel. So I'd like to give them a hand.